Welcome to the October 24th, 2023 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. We start with a roll call, please.
Chair Greenfield.
Here.
Vice Chair Brown.
Here, and I am participating remotely and invoking the just cause provision of AB 2449 in order to care for my son.
Commissioner Cribs.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
I'm also invoking because of medical condition and will be on Zoom. Thank you.
Commissioner,
And no one with me in the room.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes.
And Commissioner Wei.
Yeah, I'm remoting as well due to cold virus, and also I'm in my room myself.
Vice Mayor Stone.
Here. Thank you, and we're happy to have a quorum of 4 commissioners on site this evening. Something we've taken for granted a bit, but glad that everyone, the full commission is able to be here this evening. Now is an opportunity for public comment. Members of the public who'd like to speak to an item not on this evening's agenda can either raise their hand via Zoom or fill out a speaker card. And again, if you are speaking to an item that is on the agenda this evening, please hold off to speak to it at the appropriate time.
Chair, we have one in-person speaker. John, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I won't take that long. Chair Greenfield, Commissioners, my name is John Kelly. I recently had the occasion to look at I forget what the exact title is, but it's the fiscal year 2024 municipal fee schedule. And in that fee schedule, there's a section, I can't give you the exact page, I was trying to look it up, but I think it's around page 75 that deals with impact fees. And I think it might come as a surprise to many members of the public that those impact fees increased. I'm doing this from memory, so if staff has the resources and can look it up, but I believe that the fees went up last year by about $3,800, which in and of itself doesn't seem like a huge number, but it was starting from a fairly large base. And that I think was around $72,000. So Palo Alto is now effectively imposing a certain kind of housing tax, if you want to think about it that way, which totals over $75,000 per unit. And one caveat, it's less for apartments. I'm talking about what are deemed essentially units in R1 zones. The reason I'm here and the reason I'm taking your time, I'll try to be brief, is that I found it very difficult to disaggregate the data that exists with regard to that fee. And one of the things I'm trying to figure out is who's actually paying for those fees. Because those fees, the lion's share of those fees, I believe it's over $60,000, I think ends up in a account which is not necessarily under your control, but it's certainly something that you recommend to the council concerning its use. And I think actually you've got a lot of power with regard to how those fees are distributed. So I'm trying to answer the question of who's paying for the fees that end up in the parks and recreation. Let me put it differently. There's an account, I don't know its name, but there's about, I think, $60,000 for each of these R1 units that goes into an account which is somewhat under your jurisdiction. Why is this important? My belief is that most of those fees are being generated by things that are not themselves R1 projects. They might be an ADU, they might be some kind of a lot split, they might be something else. And I'm just trying to disaggregate the data and figure out who's really creating this fund, which is being used to create money over which you have some power. So I just thought you might have access to better information about it than I could, and rather than pursuing some other avenue to get the information, I would just appreciate it if who's ever in the planning department or in public works or whomever would have this information would be kind enough to share it with me. I think other members of the public might want to know about it too. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Oh, one other point briefly. There's a truly unfortunate scheduling conflict tonight. So you may not know it, but in the room next door, there's a whole discussion concerning the Historic Review Board and the new historic inventory for the council, which I think is kind of also under your jurisdiction. So it's unfortunate that that meeting is running from 6 to 8 and this meeting starting at 7. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all of the comments we have from the public this evening. It's always great to hear from people who take the opportunity to share something with us. Next up is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Do any commissioners have any changes or other suggestions at this point to consider? If not, then we'll move forward with the approval of minutes from the September 26th meeting. Does anyone have any comments regarding the minutes? Barring comments, is there a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I move approval.
And a second.
I'd like to second.
Great. Can we get a roll call vote on that, please?
Chair Greenfield,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Cribs,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
I am abstaining. I was not here on that, for that meeting.
Commissioner Kleinhaus,
Yes,
Commissioner Oche,
Yes.
and Commissioner Way.
Yes.
Chair, that's 6 yes with 1 abstained.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And now we'll move on to the department report, please, Darren.
Good evening, Darren Anderson with Community Services Department. I will start off with an introduction of our newest member of Community Services Department. This is Sarah Robustelli. She's the new Division Manager for Open Space, Parks, and Golf. We're really happy to have her part of the team. This is her second day, and she'll be working out of the Parks office at the Municipal Service Center with me and Lom and all the other colleagues that I think many of you know. So please join me in welcoming her to the team, and you'll be seeing more of her throughout the coming months. And I also want to let you know about a couple other recruitment process items. The interview process is underway for the 3 vacant open space technician positions, which is great. And there's an interview process underway for the new Community Services Assistant Director for Arts and Sciences. So lots of changes in personnel coming for community services. The Enjoy catalog is going to be mailed out the week of November 15th, and resident registration opens at 8:30 a.m. on December 7th, and non-resident registration opens on December 14th at 8:30. I've mentioned this before, but just a reminder, we've got the Jacko Jaunt coming up. This is the city's 4th event. It's coming up at Friday, October 27th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Lytton Plaza. And I think there's still space. If you don't have room at home to carve your jack-o'-lantern, you can sign up through this program. This is called a workshop, and carve it on the site. But space is limited and pre-registration is required. And to learn more about that, you can use the email there, enjoyonline@cityofpaloalto.com.
Real quick, Darren, what age group is that targeted towards?
It might be targeted towards younger, but I think it's open to everyone. A little bit on aquatics. The Palo Alto Masters are set to return to their normal operating schedule in November when their main coach returns from an extended trip. The team's been using Rinconada and Burgess pools throughout October to optimize workout times during this brief coaching shortage. And then a nice little note I got from the rec staff saying, due to the warm weather in October, and having sufficient lifeguards, which wasn't always the case, so it's a nice situation to be in, they were able to keep the play pool open on weekends for family recreational swim. Traditionally, the play pool closes in September and reopens in May. Some project updates. The skate park, we talked about the parking analysis was what we had been waiting for the next step. That contract's in place. The contractor has started the analysis and they've told me we should have their findings in about 1 month. Johnson Park basketball court will be resurfaced on the second week of November. It'll be about 3 days of work. The Lytton Plaza fountain repair project was completed on the 5th of October. Subsequent to finishing the fountain element, there are other things we wanted to sort of polish up on the plaza itself. One is, the trees pruned. So they were pruned up by our urban forest team. Big thank you to them. The pavers on the plaza will be re-leveled next week, and we'll be replacing the trash cans by the end of November. And Piers Park Dog Park, we just added new mulch in the large and small dog park areas there. That was done last Thursday. Some CIP updates. I've bolded the ones that have been updated. The others are status quo from when we last spoke. So Cameron Park Improvement Project is the one that with the update here, and construction is anticipated to start in July 2024 and be completed in September 2024. This is a later start than we had anticipated, largely because that second bullet point you see, a 22 to 26 week lead time for the delivery of the playground equipment. So it was really surprising to us when we issued the notice to proceed to the contractor that he could go ahead and order, but this is the timeframes he was looking at. So it was good for us to know, but a little frustrating that such a long wait. Chair, you had asked last meeting if I could give you an update on the Coverly Field restroom project. The timing is that the building delivery and installation is expected to be May or June 2024. And that includes the lift station that will be a component of that restroom, given the elevations to the adjacent sewer. The Rinconada restroom project, delivery and installation in February or March 2024. And on the Robles Park Improvement Project, there was a community meeting held on October 11th that was well attended and lots of good feedback from the community. The tentative construction schedule for that is summer 2024 and be a 4-month project. During the public meeting, and we're going to have another one in that same park, we had asked for feedback. And one of the comments was, so we'll have to close the park for 4 months during summer. Is there any opportunities to push this? And Peter Jensen, who had led the community meeting for Public Works Engineering, explained, yes, there is possibility of shifting that. So that'll be a discussion point in the next community meeting. If that's what they would prefer, I think that may be an option that we could help meet their needs. And at one of our previous meetings, Commissioner Kleinhaus said it would be really nice if we could have some nature elements in the department report. And so this is my first effort towards this endeavor. I'm going to call it Nature Notes. And this one's about tarantulas because the rangers just let me know the other day, hey, we're seeing them up in Foothills Nature Preserve right now, which is exciting. So August to October is the tarantula mating season. And so the males are leaving their burrows during this time of year in search of mates. And so they can be seen throughout the park as they slowly traverse their way to find a mate. So a little bit of information about them that I think might be helpful. Oh, this is a photo of their burrow. So you may see this. They do spin the silk webbing, but not to catch prey. This is just for lining their burrow, which is interesting. They're often portrayed as jumpers or sometimes animals that would attack other people. And despite those myths, tarantulas are not aggressive. They won't generally bite unless they're provoked, and they don't chase after people, which is good to know. And they do play an important ecological role. They eat insects, plant-eating insects, and sometimes small lizards. And in turn, they serve as food for lizards, snakes, spider-eating birds, sometimes coyotes and foxes. And sometimes people will ask, when I was a ranger, I used to get the question, how come I don't see them at other times of the year? And where are they coming from? Well, they're always there. It's just that most of the time they're daytime staying in their burrows, and nighttime they come out to hunt. But you can occasionally see these kind of burrows as you walk around, and there are often tarantulas in them. If you're lucky enough to observe one, please leave it alone and just observe it from a distance. And Chair, that concludes the department report.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for the nature note. I have seen a tarantula at foothills in the past. It's tough on the guys. They have a long journey and it doesn't work out well for them in the end either.
I left that part out, but yeah, oftentimes it's not a happy ending.
Do any commissioners have any questions for Darren regarding the department report or other department-related questions?
I do, Chair.
Go ahead, Ann.
I like the nature notes. That's a nice title. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Is there an update on the family restroom status at Rinconada?
I can bring that to the next meeting. I
Great.
did talk to Public Works and they have a staff person who's working on that.
Great.
And so I can hopefully get an update from them at the next one. I'll make a note right now.
Thank you very much.
bet.
And then with all the renovations at Lytton Plaza, anything about the table tennis tables? Are they still standing up?
One of them had to come out. It was too badly damaged. One still remains.
And are we going to try to replace the second one?
You know, we've been discussing different options, probably not that same style of the framed aluminum or metal, but maybe a concrete option. Something like that is what staff's looking into, options that we can fit out there that would look good and hold up well to the
Thank
use.
you.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Our first business item is one of our favorites of the year. Look, we're happy to welcome back the Palo Alto Youth Council. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, Joy.
Just a quick clarification. Thank you and welcome, Sarah. Great to have you. I just wanted to confirm, you talked about a project completion, but there were other following action items. So just to clarify what depicts, a project completion. Like if we say something is completed, but we still have action items, at what's the cutoff?
I see. Yeah, like the Lytton example, very good. So the project itself was really to address that fountain, which had fallen in disrepair. And that was what all the money that had been earmarked towards that project was towards. And once we finished it, sort of begged the question, what about all these other little cleanups that will just make the site pop a little more and look clean and fresh? So it wasn't part of the original scope of what we were looking at. It was more like, let's try to make this look the best we can and polish this park up a little.
Thank you. So that's nice to happen. Awesome. Thank you.
I have a quick.
Go ahead, Nels.
Yeah. Hey, Darren, good job on the update. And there's a lot of really interesting things happening in the city in the next couple of months, but always, right? Is there any way that we hear about it because we're on a commission, and sure there's a lot of other ways that people hear about it, but is there some other, I guess, mechanism or communication in place that can let people know what's going on, like Lytton Plaza and all the other things that are happening in the city? It's other than, I don't know, maybe it could be an ongoing weekly something or another. I'm not sure. Maybe there is something, I just don't.
There is, and we don't always take advantage of it as much as we should. I think it's a growth area for me and my team is to do a little bit more outreach to our chief communication officer. She's wonderful about willing to take whether it's a volunteer project or maybe something you just accomplished it, and she'll put it out on this myriad of different platforms, whether it's Nextdoor, Facebook, et cetera. And she is fantastic about sending it out. So it's really just on my team to make sure we send those good messages saying, hey, we just finished that up and we want people to know, want people to come enjoy it. So I think I'll work on improving that.
Yeah, Nextdoor is probably a perfect example. A lot of people do kind of pay attention to some of the stuff that's in there. So thank you.
Darren, just a thought on that. It's a great idea. Great question, Commissioner Freeman. You prepare a very nice presentation of your department report. Would it be reasonable to just forward that to the communication department and let them look and see if there's anything? I mean, you could potentially highlight things, or they can look and see and ask questions.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You've already done the work on it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll ask.
Anything else before we move on? Any commissioners online? And I will point out to the commissioners who are not on site this evening. If you have something to say, I think you can raise your hand via Zoom and I'll see it. And if all else fails, just try speaking. Okay, now we're still very happy to have the Palo Alto Youth Council joining us this evening.
And Chair, if I may, I'd like to introduce Chris Sanchez. He's the Recreation Coordinator that helps facilitate with the Youth Council. Thanks so much for being here, Chris.
Thank you.
Check. Thank you, Darren. My name is Chris Sanchez. I'm the staff liaison for the Palo Alto Youth Council. I would like to thank the commissioners for inviting us today and Javad and Darren for making this meeting happen. Without further ado, I'm going to give it to the Palo Alto Youth Council.
Hello, thank you to the Parks and Recreation Commission for providing us the opportunity to speak with you all today. We are the Palo Alto Youth Council, which we may refer to as PAYC during this presentation. I'm Olivia, the president. This is Natia, our vice president, and then this is Zara and Siona, two of our members. We will also have time for questions at the end of our presentation. All right, we are comprised of 4 committees of 22 Palo Alto teens spanning 6 high schools across the Bay Area. Our primary objectives are to conduct research about Palo Alto teens, organize events, collect and create educational resources such as a newspaper. But what sets us apart from other youth groups in Palo Alto is our proximity to the city council as liaison. So we send 1 or more of Palo Alto Youth Council members to each of the city council's meetings and also host study sessions with them to talk about initiatives and policy.
All right, so just as a quick intro to our leadership team, this is Olivia, our president. My name is Natia, I'm the vice president. Our secretary is Melinda, and our public information officers are Priscilla and Joshua, and we have some of our lovely members here as well. Next, so we're just going to go through our term last year and talk about some of our themes and events from last year.
All right, next slide, please. Because we did not have a Parks and Recreation study session last year, we will also be covering the initiatives that we conducted. The 3 themes that we decided were mental health, civic engagement, and climate change. We just saw that our Palo Alto teens, the peers that we have in this city, tended to focus their advocacy and engagement in these 3 subjects.
Next slide. A project we focused on last year was creating a resource guide focused on mental health awareness and accessibility. The content consisted of mental health terminology and available resources. We aim to have both an online copy on our Instagram and website, as well as physical versions. We distributed these brochures in schools, mental health safe spaces, future events, and public libraries. Next slide. One event we have every year is the Final Study Cram Slam. The objective of this event is to provide academic support, stress relief, bonding among peers in times when students have many upcoming tests and finals. Our offerings included student-led study groups, peer tutoring, silent study spaces, relaxing activities like slime making, and dinner and snacks on all days the event was held. We had over 200 students attend over the span of 3 days. Next slide. A new initiative we introduced last year was the monthly political newsletter, which focused on increasing awareness and engagement on civic issues. Our newsletter focused mainly on community-level upcoming events and current news. Next slide. All right, so moving on to our theme of civic engagement. So we had our city official meet and greet. And so our main goal with this event was to provide teenagers in Palo Alto access to our city officials, such as our mayor, our vice mayor, our council members, the city manager, community services, fire, and police department, as well as our one and only Parks and Recreation Commissioner. And during this event, We hosted a panel where we asked questions about why they chose their respective career paths, as well as what they love about it and their dreams and aspirations for Palo Alto. So we really wanted this event to increase the communication between the youth and the city, and we wanted to educate our peers on how the city officials are involved in Palo Alto and how they can also be involved as well. Next slide, please. And keeping with the theme of civic engagement, one of our goals last year was to increase voter turnout and encourage our peers to either register to vote or pre-register. So we held registration booths at many schools, such as Pali and Gunn and Castellea, as well as a table at our local farmers market to make registering easy and accessible to everyone in our community. Next slide, please. And then we ended our year with a super fun environmental movie night where we invited teenagers and families to a screening of the Lorax. And for this event, we really wanted to boost community bonding and increase the amount of climate education and advocacy in our community. Next slide, please. All right, next up, we're just going to be talking about some of our goals for this coming year, as well as some of the initiatives we have planned so far.
Our two themes this year are mental health and civic engagement. The first initiative is a new one, a mental health census, in order to quantify the number of youth experiencing disorders, as well as understand barriers to treatment and advocacy. We plan to distribute this census via high schools around the Bay Area, and the contents will be used to inform both the City Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as potentially shared via infographics or social media to young people around Palo Alto. The second one also concerns the themes of mental health, which is a mental health film and potentially a documentary. This will be disseminated using 60-second Instagram reels, as well as potentially a longer movie. We aim to highlight youth perspectives, specifically those in Palo Alto, as well as give voice to mental health professionals in order to increase awareness and advocacy for mental health.
Okay, final study slam cram. Because this is an annual event, we are continuing to host it this year. It has always been a favorite as it reduces the anxiety that finals can bring. Next slide, please. Next, for our census, we wanted to hear from other teenagers in our community, so we chose these main points to share with them. We also hope to share our findings from this with the City Council to let them know what current issues are on the minds of teenagers. These themes will also lead into next year's themes. Next slide, please. Okay, our newspaper, Palo Altogether. While we had our newsletter last year, we did make some adjustments to make it more engaging and accessible to teenagers in our community. One main thing we changed about it is making sure it was a physical handout and making it available on our website. The newsletter focuses on one current event and more local ones, such as how to get involved in Palo Alto.
And we will have a copy shared with all of you, a physical copy after our presentation. Next slide, please.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. We really, really appreciate you giving your time, and we really hope that you have learned more about our council as well as our initiatives for last year and this coming year. We would like to thank the following people on the slide, and especially say thank you to Chris for being such an incredible advisor. Next, we will be sharing some of our questions for you guys. So yeah.
The primary question we have is how PAYC can best serve the Park and Recreation Commission's primary objectives this year. This may include facilitating communication with Palo Alto young people via social media or in person, attending your meetings, or more study sessions. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing more from you. Next slide.
Well, thank you very much for the great presentation. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm with us this evening. It's always great to see the leaders of tomorrow getting a little preview, a sneak preview, and I'm sure it's hopefully it's a fun experience for you to be here, and encourage you to not be strangers in these chambers, to come and comment, listen and comment to City Council meetings and to commission meetings on agendas that are of interest to you. You raised some great questions. Maybe we'll start with Commissioner Cribbs as the liaison, or Commissioner O'Shea, excuse me. Yeah, sorry, that's right.
I would like to thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to start by applauding you, Chris. Thank you for doing a great job, and to thank your leadership for all that you're doing. Commissioner Bing and I are very proud of what you're doing, and we owe you visits. In fact, I'm planning to do like monthly or quarterly if you would accommodate me. I'm happy to come in and say hello and talk more, and we can have that channel going as a liaison officer for your youth council. I appreciate your 3 teams, but I'm just curious to know why climate change dropped this year.
I think we wanted to focus more specifically on civic engagement and mental health, though climate change is still a big concern for us. We'd say that in general, we also want to speak to what the teens in Palo Alto are most concerned with. And based on what we've done in terms of talking to other peers and the demographics and interests of the Palo Alto Youth Council this year, we decided that these are the 2 most pressing issues that we'd like to cover.
Awesome. You touched a little bit on my next question. So I was going to ask, how do we get feedback from other teams who are not actively engaged? How do you get, do you have surveys done? How do you get, the word out? I know I go past Michelle Park a lot and I see, your ads or, a lot of things that you do. But I'm just curious to know, do you publicize the feedback, like surveys and stuff like that? So every teen is, engaged in what you're doing and carried along as well.
I'd say primarily all of our meetings are open to the public, so any teens can come and speak there. If not, we also hold events throughout the year where they can engage directly with the Palo Alto Youth Council, voice their concerns or potential interests. And we also noticed this as a concern last year, which is why we created the Youth Political Issues Census to distribute this year in order to better understand the specific political, civic issues that Palo Alto teens are most concerned with. So we definitely acknowledge and understand this barrier.
I know that young people are very big on apps. So I don't know if it's something that you could consider. And also you talked about a youth census. So I'm not too sure how you're planning to do that, to get feedback, so every young person feels heard. And also I'm just curious to know if you have any channel for mentorship. I know Chris and I and Commissioner Bing had talked a little bit about that. Mentoring people who are younger than you as well, as you get, mentorship from City Council or from the Parks and Recreation Commission. Do you have other channels where you do like peer-to-peer mentorship, or you do like, mentoring people who are younger than you? Because I feel you have a lot to offer. Your voice should be heard as well. So is this something your team is considering? If not, is there any way we can help?
Yeah, considering your point on mentorship, we don't have any current initiatives that are going towards the really young generation in Palo Alto, but I would say that a lot of our events are geared towards teenagers and youth in general, just that they can see how they can get involved in Palo Alto. So we do aim to speak to them through that. So like our events like the Final City Cram Slam, we do offer like peer mentorship in a way where we try to help our peers out and we create a safe environment for everyone in Palo Alto to come together and be together in a stressful time. Yeah. Also within our council as well, we have seniors, we have juniors, we have freshmen, so we have the full high school demographic. And I would say I joined when I was a freshman and I definitely got mentored by our president at that time. So there's mentorship within our council as well, which I think is really helpful.
I see, thank you. So based on what you asked, just to reiterate what the chair said, we would love to see more of you. Yeah. And you'll be seeing more of me and Commissioner Bing as well. Feel free to ask questions and also to express what you think the commission can help do as well. I don't know if that answers all the questions you had there, but I think it's like a summary. I'm also curious to know when your next meet and greet is with the city council. Is it like a frequent thing you plan or?
That event is not annual. We noticed
see.
that at the last event, we didn't have as much of a turnout as we had hoped for, as in comparison to things like the mental health community fair. So we're trying to shift our gear to focus more on like online advocacy, posting political issues, current events on social media, as we see that that's a channel through which a lot of Palo Alto teams today get their political information and advocate for their interests.
Awesome. I would pass on the baton to Commissioner Bean and feel free to ask any other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, before you do that, I just want to reach out. If there's any members of the public who would like to speak on this topic, now's an opportunity to do so. And given that I don't see anyone raising their hand for that, please continue. Our other joint liaison to the Youth Council, Commissioner Bing Wei, please share with us.
Thanks, Chair Greenfield, and thanks, Commissioner Oche. I was delighted to be able to visit Chris and the youth team a few weeks ago to see them in action. I'm very impressed by how Chris actually led the team and I met Olivia briefly as well. So the presentation itself speaks for itself, the work you've done. And for 2 points in terms, mental health issues and also the civic engagement, both something I'm concerned and also care a lot about, raising a family who's just turning 20. So, and then I wonder whether it helps our plan as a conversation with Chris. I'll be there every other month, and next time will be November, looking to the advisory council's meeting. Your event planning looks really organized last time I was there. For the mental health aspect, whether it'll be helpful taking on what Commissioner Elchi would say, technology could be used. I know Nueva students, since Nueva is in your sector, were developing an app for testing, wearable app for testing anxiety level. And it started by a girl who actually broke up with her boyfriend and seeing her own anxiety level very high. So the student now currently is in Stanford. I think she's originally from Palo Alto as well, and Stanford faculty's daughter who's in Stanford University, whether you want me to connect you guys with her to seek some collaboration. That's one point. The second resource is to offer about civic engagement, and I happen to be co-founder of an organization called 8x8 USA, which is encouraging Asian American youth to register vote, as the register vote is very low in this particular ethnic group. And 8x8 meaning you encourage 8 people to vote, and the other 8 people will encourage another 8 people to vote. And 8 is also a prosperous, lucky number. So the team, which initially led by high school as well, is developing an app, which is being in beta testing. If you want to connect you with the team leader, he's currently a college student too. I'd be happy to do that. And just seeking more collaboration among the teams. I think he was leading it since he was 16. He's now 19 years old. So that's 2 resources that I could offer, and I can have more conversation when I see you all in person next November. And again, I'm really applauding the work you've been doing, and I'm very impressed by your presentation. Hopefully you can make a regular visit to the chamber, maybe, once a quarter, or depends on your bandwidth as well, or at least once every 6 months. I hope I'm in a better shape. I'm slightly under the weather today, but I really enjoyed your presentation, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your resources, and we hope you feel better shortly.
Thank you. I have sort of a clarifying question that I'll step in with before going out to the other commissioners for comments. Could you like to better understand how often do you meet with a city council member? You have a liaison role with city council. Could you explain that in a little more detail? And part of the reason I'm asking is to understand how a similar type of liaison role might be possible with the Parks and Rec Commission. And in fact, one of the line item, or one of the aspirational goals in our master plan, the Parks master plan, is to develop a teen advisory committee. We haven't gotten very far on that. And so we're interested in hearing how this could further develop. I think starting off with the developing a relationship between liaisons and from our commission and your council is a good start, but how to perhaps formalize that, and really it goes towards answering your questions of how can you be participating and how can you be valuable.
Thank you for your question. The primary way that we are involved is sending one or more of the Palo Alto Youth Council members to each of the city council meetings. So that is weekly on Mondays. And we also occasionally have our council representative, Julie Lithcott-Hames, in attendance at our meetings on Tuesdays. We also sometimes email back and forth about other initiatives, including Julie Lithcott-Hames' Youth Young Minds Celebrated event that was outside of the Palo Alto Youth Council, but we helped market and facilitate. We're happy to do similar things for the Parks and Recreation Commission, though we know that the Palo Alto Youth Council is geared more towards policy and civic initiatives. Boards such as the Teen Advisory Board in Palo Alto is more geared towards community bonding, sort of community events.
Thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for staff first. Can commissioners talk to the youth council not through the liaisons?
Chris, did you want to help answer that one?
Commissioners talk to us without liaisons.
Sir, can you repeat the question, please?
Can we, commissioners, talk to people from the youth council or the youth council as a whole directly and not raise issues only through our liaisons? I work with youth in other communities on issues that are somewhat related to mental health and environment, like, light pollution, which impacts health and mental health in youth. So I don't know how, but I'm not on the liaison group. So I was just wondering, and I think this question is really for staff, not necessarily to you. Is it okay for commissioners to talk to you guys?
Yeah, short answer is yes. Like the kids has mentioned, all our meetings are open to the public. We occasionally have some public speakers come in or reach out to us. Wanted to talk to the Palo Alto Youth Council directly or just our teen advisory board, and we would give them a couple minutes during our meeting to kind of have their presentation, talk to the kids directly, and either start a collaboration or relationship with the Palo Alto Youth Council or teen advisory board. So yes, you're welcome to join any of our meetings. You can let us know or send us an email or contact me directly, and we'll give you a couple minutes and talk to the council, and we'll add you to our agenda, or that's open to the public as well.
Thank you. My other question, you asked about how you can help us, and I'm assuming that you're monitoring agendas for city council. Do you speak at city council or you just observe? Because sometimes we have items that could use some support from the youth on the city council agenda. Like tonight, we're going to decide about recommendations for park dedication. So when that goes to council, do you guys sometime, and I'm not sure what the recommendation will be because we haven't discussed it yet, but can you speak at council about the recommendations that we make?
Yes, we We typically do not speak at those council meetings. We take notes to bring back to the Palo Alto Youth Council, and it helps inform the initiatives that we do later on in the year. However, I think we're open to public comment and things like that. We would just discuss it amongst ourselves at our weekly meetings before.
And in addition to that, some of our liaisons, sometimes Commissioner Krebs last year, if she was looking for feedback from the Palo Alto Youth Council, she'll come to our meetings or she'll send me some questions. I'll present it to the Palo Alto Youth Council and we'll provide the feedback to the liaison. Same thing when Commissioner Bay has a couple questions regarding climate change. I send it to the Palo Alto Youth Council, and we'll be presenting some of our feedback to her when she comes to our meeting next month as well. So.
Thank you. My last question relates to, we're Parks and Rec, we have recreation responsibilities in parks, but Palo Alto, unlike most other cities in our area, have large areas of nature and open space. And I was wondering if the nature issues, not only climate change, ever comes in discussions.
Yeah, so since our goals for this year are more centered on mental health and civic engagement, we haven't discussed those issues as much. But I think if it came up in discussion, we would happily discuss it. And I think it's also important to note that there are a lot of really incredible student-led climate initiatives in Palo Alto, as well as some really incredible groups in Palo Alto led by youth that are about making public comment at meetings surrounding climate change and advocating as well. So,
yeah, I know. I'm trying to separate the two. There is a lot of available science that shows that being in nature really has a direct and immediate impact to mental health and cognitive abilities, which I think is very important to consider within the discussion of mental health. There's so many different things that come into that, but the impacts of nature, of being exposed to some bird song, trees, or going out to Foothills Park for a little bit can really make a big difference. And so I was hoping that you will consider doing, maybe if you guys do researching a little bit the connection between nature and mental health.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. We will absolutely consider events or more initiatives geared towards inviting youth to spend more time in nature. Additionally, if you have any objectives or events that you want to suggest to the Palo Alto Youth Council, absolutely feel free to contact us or attend one of our meetings if you have any event proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kleinhaus. I just wanted to follow up with one of the first items you were talking about in terms of looking to attend some of the youth council meetings, and just want to understand better what you had in mind, and be while bearing in mind that we do have a couple of liaisons from our commission. So you're talking about stuff as an individual or outside the commission, or as something more commission related. And if it's the latter, then we need to make sure that we're working through the liaisons as well.
Right. So I was worried about the Brown Act, and like if I go to one of their meetings that talk about nature or dark sky or any of these things, how does that? I don't know where the boundary of Brown Act is, and I want to make sure that I'm not crossing it.
Okay, thanks. That's something we can take offline.
Okay, thank you.
So, Chair Greenfield, I have one more question or maybe suggestion to the Youth Council. So you mentioned how you can help us. So thinking, since you're working on social media, even last time when I saw you in action organize your meeting, you tried to put a little video together to advertise that event. Maybe that's something you can help us maybe do some social media about what Park and Rec does. And if you attend this throughout the evening, there's something you can share with your audience. And also if you have us out as a speaker, hypothetically sort of echoing what Commissioner Kleinhaus was saying about how nature can reduce anxiety. At the same time, there's a climate anxiety among youth, the older generation. If you happen to have an advisory council meeting in Foothill Park, having Commissioner Kleinhaus as a speaker, maybe that's event worth making into a little video as well. So see commissioners in action and on your social media channel. That might be something you can help us to pass the word around what Park and Rec and the Recreation Commission are doing. Do you think that's probably viable? I'll be happy to help you on that as well. We can talk more when I'm in your advisory council meeting next month.
Absolutely. That's actually something that we thought about prior to our study session today. We thought of a short 30-second TikTok video that we could make with the commissioners if they're available at any point. But we're definitely open to helping advocate for the Parks and Recreation Commission or advertise among young people.
Excellent. Yeah, it's very much a cross-generation learning. We are older generation using you use young, social platform to look into passing out a message or learn experience or learning from you as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Additionally, we do have our Palo Altogether little news magazine. So we do hope to promote city events and stuff like that. Yeah, we have it right here on our magazine and hopefully distribute this to teenagers in Palo Alto as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Let's hear from some other commissioners who haven't had an opportunity to speak. Vice Chair Brown.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you guys for your time. I grew up in Palo Alto, so I know how busy you are, and I was probably not even half as busy as you guys are these days. So I appreciate your time and dedication towards the city. And thanks, Chris, for your time and leadership on this effort. Just responding to your question about how you can support our initiatives, I think going through the liaisons and making sure you're aware of what is on our agenda, and we can do our best to identify items where we think the youth may be interested in, but you guys really know better than we do on what issues you might be interested in or the youth of Palo Alto may be interested in. We can say we're discussing a skate park. You might want to be interested. You might want to show up and provide input on that issue, but you also might be interested in the park dedication, like Commissioner Kleinhaus mentioned. So I would just say monitoring our agendas, maybe having a representative to look, or our liaisons can also funnel those to you if they're available to do that. We do have far fewer meetings than the city council, so it's a little bit easier to monitor our agenda load than the city council ones. And then the only other comment I had was I'm sure you guys have a process for how your themes or areas of focus for the year are determined, and maybe you want to speak to that process and how those are identified. But just wanted to offer that obviously the city council has their goal setting, priority setting process. We also have our work plan development process annually, and just looking through those documents or those meetings, or even being in attendance at those meetings to identify potential areas of alignment on the work that we're doing with the work that you're doing. You guys have a process for identifying your work, and we want to make sure that there are natural synergies that you guys can see and how we could work together for the year when we do annual planning. But great job and keep doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cribbs.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. It's really great to see you again. And I just want to say that your voice is so important for all of us to hear. And so please continue to use that voice. We talked a little bit about with the other commissioners about an opportunity to get involved in other things that we do and all of that. We certainly, if I took the list of all the suggestions we had today, you would have more than a big workload with everything else you also do at school and preparing for college and friends and all of that. So I think we're probably adding a lot to your agenda. And so we appreciate your listening definitely to that. But In terms of following our agenda, over the years, we've had study sessions and had groups and task force, and I think we've really tried hard from our perspective to include the voice of a youth, whether it was on the Baylands or whether it was on Foothill Park or whether it was on a new program. And so that's really, really, really important. And if we can continue to keep that line of communication open, I think it would be really great. In the meantime, I would commend you for everything that you're doing, and thank you all so very much for even being here tonight and being part of this. We really appreciate it. Palo Alto's really, really, really lucky to have you, and you are obviously the voice of the future, so it's always good to hear from you. Thank you so much. And Chris, thank you for your leadership as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Freeman.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. And I really, again, thank you guys for your presentation and the hard work that you're doing. I want to give you a shout out for, doing the important initiatives that you're focused on. I know you've got a lot on your plate, a very short timeline that you're working with and trying to, balance everything with schools. And if you're ready for, a very short timeline to get a lot of initiatives in. What I do want to know is if you are there in trying to stay on top of these initiatives. I note that you added mental health and along with all the other initiatives that you've had. But do you tap into some of other groups within your school or outside your school that can help kind of keeping those initiatives moving forward? And the other question is whether or not you are reaching out to other communities, let's say outside of Palo Alto and others, to make sure you've got a pretty good teen demographics, I guess, that's giving us more information about some of the things that might be affecting them in their areas. And we're sort of in a bubble where we might not see the importance of that.
Yeah, what's wonderful about our youth council team is that we're comprised of people spanning from like San Mateo all the way down to like Los Altos in terms of where they attend school, but we all are based or we either attend school or are residents of Palo Alto. I'd say we also distribute our resources, including our magazine, our political magazine, also flyers for our events and initiatives to all of these schools. So essentially across the Bay Area in order to reach students beyond the Palo Alto region. And then what was the other question?
No, whether or not you're tapping into other groups to help you with, helping moving some of those initiatives forward.
Yeah, we also talk to some of these student council groups and other groups within those areas in terms of like submitting an editorial piece for our magazine or working alongside us at the final study Cram Slam. And we've contacted Castanea, Palo Alto High School, Gunn High School about sending peer counselors, peer tutors to these events, hosting booths in order to provide additional resources to young people.
Okay.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, we've successfully had a really great partnership with the Alcove Center in Palo Alto that is catered towards teenage mental health. And also last year we had our mental health panel of speakers, and we actually had an incredible student from Pali come and speak about her experience as well. So hopefully we've been getting a lot of diverse perspectives and voices on our topics as well.
Thank you, and keep up the good work. Appreciate it. And as well as you, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple more things. Whenever the kids have an initiative or events, we do reach out to other organizations who's more specialized in that topic area to get their feedback or in collaboration to their event to tap into their resources. In addition to that, we also, the Palo Alto Youth Council also attends a mini conferences called Yak Social, which is usually comprised with the different Yak commissions in the Bay Area to kind of reach out, network, and see what they're working on, and maybe some of the things that they're focusing on can be implemented on our own city as well. And this is also an annual event that they attend.
Thank you. A few more comments as far as what you can do to get involved. I'm very interested in understanding, I think as a commission, we're very interested in understanding the youth community's perspective on recreation programs, and what we can do to better serve you. There is some work being done on the commission to review recreation programs, and also to review the master plan itself. This is the Parks, Trails, Open Space, and Recreation Master Plan. It's a big fat document, and with a lot of great ideas in it, and some of them have been implemented, and it's kind of our guiding light on what we're aiming for. I expect that we'll probably be discussing the master plan at our meeting next month. This might be interesting for some people from your council to monitor and potentially speak on during the public comment period, or provide feedback at a later date. I am interested in understanding how we might be able to better formalize the relationship that we have into a more direct liaison role, and I'll lean on the liaisons of our commission to help pursue that idea further. I know one of the difficulties is you have a certain period of time when you're involved, and we need to do our best to take advantage of your input and what you can offer during the school year in which during the year in which you serve this role. But I would just reiterate that your voice is very powerful, and it's unique. Most of the people who speak and comment on issues, whether it's before a commission or before our city council, they look more like the people up here. They don't look so much like you. And when the younger voice makes the effort to get up and speak, it's immediately recognized and appreciated. And so you've got instant clout when you take the effort to come up and speak, and it's refreshing, and it's also a perspective that's not that's fresh and offering a lot of new ideas. So I can't encourage you enough to participate in whatever way it makes sense for you, and whatever you're inspired to do. Do any other commissioners have some follow-up questions or comments?
I have one question. Is there ever a time when you're planning all these really cool events and everything that somebody has to say to you, there's not enough money in the budget?
Actually, we've been pretty fortunate to not have to worry about our budget too much. We do try to make sure that our events aren't just about getting people food. So we're also very lucky to have speakers coming to us voluntarily, like our city council meet and greet, as well as mental health professionals that came to our mental health panel. So that's never really been too much of an issue for us.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Well, I just want to say, I suspect that the Parks and Rec commissioners have a fairly limited TikTok presence right now, and anything you were able to do to help expand that would be interesting for sure, perhaps welcome. So thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know for me and a lot of POIC members, you have considerable clout among us as well. So we look forward to collaborating with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, tough act to follow, but next step on our agenda is the park dedication of the Tower Well site. Darren?
Thank you, Chair. Darren Anderson with Community Services Department again. This item is to discuss the potential park dedication for the Tower Well site. That's a 0.19 acre parcel located at 201 Alma Street. So a little bit about a park dedication ordinance and what that means. What it's essentially doing is reserving that land for park recreation and conservation purposes only. And if we were to change the use of that, it would require a vote of the people. So it's something that should be thought through well and in advance before deciding to dedicate a property. The PRC Park Dedication Ad Hoc has met with staff numerous times to discuss potential sites for park dedication, which is of course part of our work plan. And while Ad Hoc and staff continue to investigate several different potential sites, this site, the Tower Well, has been identified as a location we think we should move forward with now in terms of dedication. This is a photo of the Tower Well. And I just want to point out a few things. Of course, here's the obvious tower itself. And below it, and this is a 79-foot high concrete tower well. And at the base of it is this building that was referenced in the staff report. It's connected to the well itself. There's nothing really in it now. There was some old storage items. It's not in the greatest condition right now. And I don't foresee it being a usable element of a park if we were to dedicate it, at least in its current capacity. I don't think that's feasible. And the ad hoc thus far hasn't discussed any potential uses for the building. It's really the adjacent site that's already developed. Let's talk about what is on the site. We've got a decomposed granite trail, native plants, 2 park benches, an antique water pump display, 5 interpretive signs. Staff report mistakenly said 4, it is 5. And there's an electric fiber utility box. And I just want to point out that the maintenance of the site is already performed by a contractor that Community Services Department manages. This will continue to be the case regardless of park dedication. And I should also note that these park-like elements went into this area in the year 2000. I just want to show a few photos so you can see what the interpretive signs look like, get a rough idea. And here's the granite pathway that we talked about. It's a very short pathway. It's a very small little park-like setting. This is the valve pump, the water pump display. And then in the back here, you can see this utility box. And when I conferred with the utility department before we started thoroughly investigating the site as a potential one, I wanted to understand, do you have any concerns? And they pointed out, they just wanted us to know and acknowledge that we do have electric and fiber utility infrastructure at this area. It serves the adjacent area and will have to remain and could require maintenance or replacement in the future. I don't believe that replacement or maintenance of this particular infrastructure would damage or change the use if this were a dedicated park in any way, other than the amount of time it takes to replace or fix it. It doesn't mean fundamentally altering the area, as I understand it. A little bit on the history of this particular site. In February, the Tower Well was built in 1910 to store Palo Alto's water supply. In 1988, City Council approved a staff recommendation to abandon the Tower Well. And in March 1992, Council directed staff to solicit some conceptual proposals for the reuse and disposition of the tower site. In 1992, in December, 3 proposals were received. And in August of 1993, the Historic Resources Board requested that City Council designate the Tower Well site as a Category 2 building on the city's historic structure inventory list because of its historical significance. And in February 1993, the City Council made the decision not to designate the Tower Well on that historic building inventory and rejected those conceptual proposals. Instead, the council directed that the property be land banked and for a beneficial use to be considered in the future. In 1996, in February, council directed staff to prepare an RFP, a request for proposal for an option to sell this site. And in 1997, council made the final decision not to sell this property. And shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, they added those park-like elements that I discussed. And since that time, that's the condition it's been in. Next steps, where we go from here, the ad hoc and staff will meet with the Palo Alto Historical Association and discuss potential names for this park. The name would accompany the park dedication ordinance. So when we're ready to make a recommendation to council, that name would accompany it. So we're hoping to resolve this discussion with the Historical Association. We meet with them soon and talk that issue through. Assuming everything goes smoothly, we'd come back in November or December with an action item for the commission to make a formal recommendation to council to adopt an ordinance dedicating this parcel. And then January, February timeframe that could go to city council as an action item for them to adopt that recommendation and dedicate that land. And staff presentation is wrapped up there, Chair.
Thank you. In a moment, we'll ask if there's any members of the public who'd like to speak to this item. Before that, do any commissioners have any clarifying questions regarding the staff presentation?
Just a quick question. Thank you so much, Darren. I was hoping I would see maybe like associated impacts for decommissioning.
Is it number 3?
So what happens if we're dedicating it? What are the impacts?
The impacts is that if the council were to accept your recommendation, that it would be limited to those 3 purposes that I mentioned before. And a change in those 3 purposes would require a vote of the people. So it's a big endeavor if we were to say, actually, we want to use this whole site for something totally unrelated to park uses. There would be a very lengthy and involved process involved if we wanted to make that change once it's been dedicated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Kleinhaus, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you. Do you know if there's any bats in any of the structures?
I visited a few days ago and went inside both the building and the tower, and there were no bats.
Thank you. No signs either?
There were signs of rat feces, and that was the only thing that I observed.
Okay.
No whitewash on the walls, and no pellets from owls, nothing like that.
Any other clarifying questions? Then let's go to members of the public.
Chair, we have one in-person speaker. John? You have 3 minutes and you've been unmuted.
Chair Greenfield, Commissioners, I just have a question really, which is, it seems as though you probably have a limited budget for acquisitions of this type. And I believe there's been somewhat of a lack of coordination between what's happening here tonight and the city's efforts with the housing element. It appears from where we stand with the housing element process right now that we may have a huge expansion of housing on the periphery of Palo Alto. I refer to it frequently as San Antonio Stan, but there's certainly a large part of the community which is in and around San Antonio, and particularly south of San Antonio, which it may not be a park desert, but it's certainly semi-arid down there. And I just would, I don't know what your decision-making process is. I don't know what other sites you've considered, but in general, I would say that if you have a marginal dollar and the city's talking about locating thousands of new housing units in that area, it would be much more prudent and it would be of greater service to the community to spend the money down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start off now with the ad hoc, which is Vice Chair and myself. Vice Chair Brown, would you like to make some comments first?
Sure, and thank you, Darren, for the wonderful presentation with all the history in the background. I just wanted to start by saying that this is the beginning of our effort in terms of park dedication. So some of our priorities were to pursue the low-hanging fruit areas that people may already think are dedicated parkland, but are not already dedicated as parkland. And this really fell into that category. We have actually a long list of other properties that we're sort of exploring and considering, but this was one that that seemed fairly straightforward to move forward with, and be able to pursue additional dedicated parkland in the city with relatively few hurdles. I appreciate the background on the site and how it was envisioned for use and potentially disposed of at one point, and that the city is already maintaining the property, so there is no additional cost. The city would be maintaining that property regardless. So I appreciate staff's work and look forward to meeting with the representatives from the historical group and coming up with a name, hoping that we can get some support from the rest of the commission tonight.
Thank you, Mandy. And I appreciate you pointing that out. I was a little my thunder. I was quite happy to share. I would note even more specifically, one of the key sites we've been looking at more recently is Rinconada Gardens. There are some potential hiccups regarding that. We're working to work through. Another interesting site that a member of the public suggested is some traffic circles outside San Antonio Avenue near San Antonio Road near Alma. But there's one particular circle that's used by the local residents there for congregating for dogs and things like that. And that's a potentially interesting site to be looking at. And as Vice Chair mentioned, there is a long list we're working on. Darren, could you just re-clarify what the financial implications are of potentially dedicating this area as
I think they're relatively low. I think we would add, like we do in almost every one of our urban parks, a sign. So I think that would be one element. At some point, this is sort of regardless of whether we're dedicated or not, but those interpretive signs are 20 years old and you could see that there's rust on the edges. And at some point that needs to be refreshed too. Again, that's regardless of dedication, that should be done. But the park sign is one of the few things that I could think of, and maybe some touch-ups because it hasn't had a lot of renovations, I would say, since it was built out in 2000 with the benches and stuff. But it's in good shape. It's just a little older looking.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually out at the site today and looking at the interpretive signs. Sorry, I did count 6, including the dedication sign. There's one round back. But they actually look like they're in pretty good shape, with the exception of one that had a little graffiti issue that looked like it could be addressed. So I was pretty encouraged by that. I would assume that at some point in time, the issue of the building comes up, and if this is dedicated as parkland, there would likely be some potential uses for a functional building on that site, and we can that's a bridge to cross another day certainly. But I can get T-Man and finance jumping on this and see what we can do there once we come up with some good plans. I mean, this is aspirational, of course, but this is something down the road that seems well within the realm of possibility. One last thing I'll add is speaking to my family about the site, and there's very clear memories of this site being prominent in the 3rd grade Palo Alto history tour, along with City Hall and El Palo Alto and other sites along the way. But it was well recognized and one of the longer stops on the tour. So it'd be great to have this as a dedicated park to ensure that it's available for our grandchildren to be part of their tour. Other commissioners like to speak on this? Commissioner Freeman.
Quick question is, you did, what's been the maintenance cost on that? Maybe you just said that, but.
You know, I didn't mention the amount we spend. It's built into a very large contract, and I'd have to double check. I don't have it.
But in relation to other parks, it's probably.
Yeah, very low.
Okay.
It's very small, and the amount of, there's no grass to mow. There's very light pruning, if at all, occasional cleaning of the interpretive signs. So it's probably, the predominant thing is probably picking up litter. So it's pretty low cost, I
Yeah,
believe.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I was as well just interested in the cost and what the projected cost was over the next year. And also a little bit more about the timeline if we do suggest that we do this tonight. So I'd be interested in that. The other thing is that I've been driving by there a lot lately and have walked through a couple of times. And I don't see people really using it. And so at least when I've been there. And so I'm thinking, do people really know that this is a park and it's okay to go in and sit down and look around? And I mean, I don't know that. So maybe other people have had different experiences. So I don't know.
Maybe a park sign will help. and
Maybe a park
get
sign
that on
will
our
help.
website.
I mean, it's an interesting site. There's a
Yeah.
lot of fun things there. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, a nice place to repose.
so just the cost, Darren, thinking about
I'll look
that.
into what we're currently paying, but, and I'll think more thoroughly on what else it would need. But the only thing that really pops out to me is a park sign. It's already got all the basic amenities. If we end up, the ad hoc really hasn't, and staff haven't discussed what else would we want to do to it? Like, would it need some other, I don't know, new, fresh native plantings perhaps, or something else? But the dedication portion and adding the sign saying this is such and such park, relatively low costs.
Okay.
And again, the maintenance costs are already built into the contract that exists. So in the near term, there aren't very many costs. And if the commission decides like, hey, we'd really like to do some more improvements here, well, that would depend on the nature of the improvements.
And then the name itself, you are going to work with, and the ad hoc will work with the Historical Society to get to that. And okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And I think our general goal and intention is to bring this back as an action this year, November, December, assuming we get everything sorted out.
Okay, but it'll go one at a time. So there'll be other park ordinances in the future. I'm thinking you wouldn't ever want to bundle that just to save people's time and energy, or?
We did look at bundling, and that was our original intent, but some of them have challenges that are going to take longer to
I
resolve.
see.
We
Thank you.
wanted to get one victory
That's
here
fine.
in terms of dedication.
Commissioner Way.
Thanks, Chair Greenfield. So this is actually on my block. It's like a couple blocks from where I live. So I walk past a lot. Yeah, I echo what Commissioner Ancrib was saying about it does not look like a park, and I hope would that be, need more greenery around it, and whether there should be dedication, including a history of the well, will help as well. And certainly from the distance, nobody would think it's like 3 blocks or 4 blocks from Johnson's Park, where Johnson's Park, obviously children play there and the people play basketball there. And the look and feel of making it into a park, whether we need some discussion or even ask the people on those streets, Everett and Hawthorne, maybe the neighborhood, do a quick survey, what they think can add the value. And certainly it's a good location on Elmer for a big sign dedication will draw people even driving past to see it. I'm just thinking the similar thing about how we make it more park-like or park look like, and whether more trees, even row of trees, or whether more lawns, I don't know, just throw out there. And whether it's also can be a historical site. And I'm also curious to know the process. You mentioned about working with the Palato Historical Commission, whether the neighborhood itself, who's been there for a long time, whether they would be interested to, it's a possibility to engage the people in the neighborhood.
I'll take a stab at this. I think as far as a park, this certainly isn't a heavy-duty recreational park where we're going to put a playground in and a basketball court. It's more of it's a small site, but it's more of a peaceful respite. It's a place to relax, catch your breath, reflect. I think that's certainly what the site feels like to me. I think it's pretty nice in that respect. I think there's certainly an opportunity to upgrade the vegetation a bit, take a look at the trees, trim back some. But I think it's more our goal in recommending dedication is to maintain the character of the site generally as it is now.
Yeah, I totally agree with up the vegetation. Also, whether just look into the number of parks we have, whether there's a sort of different, maybe make a Zen garden if you put a few rocks there, like a few rocks and sand. I don't know whether we have the budget or consultant can do advice. I certainly can have friends volunteer for that who does Zen garden designing or feng shui masters to see. Then it has certain characteristic different from Kids Park in Johnson's Park and different from Rinconada. So it has its own character, persona. And just take on what Chair Greenfield's saying about take a breath. It's a meditation park with a space. Just a thought on top of that.
I think that's more in keeping with the character of the site. It would be a little bit of a departure from what it is now. It is currently a historical site, whether or not it's on the historical register or not, but there are 6 interpretive signs built set up along a small decomposed granite walking loop. So it really is functional as a historical site right now. To answer your question about would that be something we would set up further? Anyway, I'll want to give other people a chance to speak. What, Commissioner Oche?
Okay, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Wei said about the aesthetic survey. I don't know for other people, but I work a lot with pictures. So if it's possible to have like what our final outcome or desired outcome should be, or what we want to do, how we want it to look like, in comparison to what we currently have. I think that might be helpful to pass on the message of, the advancement we want to do in terms of dedicating it as a parkland. Other commissioners have already reiterated what my first question was in terms of impacts, financial implications, or other impacts as well. So just to say, maybe having a clear picture of what we want it to be, the final outcome, I believe that might be quite helpful for some of us who are very picturesque. So thank you.
Commissioner Brown, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I just want to clarify like what is being discussed. It's really whether or not to dedicate this as parkland for those specific uses. I don't want us to get caught up into like a visioning exercise of what it should look like and future park improvements and tie that to whether or not it is dedicated as parkland. I think this is good feedback for staff to hear and for us to include in any sort of future budget allocations or maintenance projects that we can do in the future. But really what we're discussing tonight is to dedicate it as parkland or not. And then once it's dedicated as parkland, then it could be incorporated into future budget projects. But I just wanted to clarify what we were working on as our ad hoc.
Thank you. Darren, would you like to comment further on that?
Yeah, that's correct. The park dedication is sort of independent of any future park improvement projects. So we have a number of dedicated parkland elements that aren't developed yet. and they're sort of waiting for development. So they can be separated out. They don't have to be fully realized or envisioned park element. There was also a question about the historical element. So if we wanted to come back and do that formal designation as a historical site, its park dedication would not prohibit that. So they can always come back and make it historically designated site if that was the wish of the city or the Palo Alto Historical Association or the Historic Resources Board.
Thanks for the clarification. Quick question. I'm not very familiar about how the naming of parks are done. Could you share like a link, just to enlighten?
Yeah, there's a naming policy that the city's got. I'm glad to share that with the commission. I'll be sure to share it, email it out to the whole commission. And in it, it's got a lot of details depending on what you're naming and whether it's the name of a person or not. So the policy does call to go through the Palo Alto Historical Association. So that'll be our first step, assuming it was to be named after a person. That's the first step in the process. They make a recommendation to the Parks Commission, and that would go to the council for adoption.
I see. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Commissioner Kleinhaus, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. Yes, so I will be supportive a motion that would go for dedication. I thank Mandy and staff for clarifying what we're doing now and that this is not really what we want to see the park in the future, but all we're doing now is just protecting that land for park uses. So it won't change into something else. And I think that's very important in all of Palo Alto neighborhoods, everywhere. The more land we can get and protect, the better it is for the future of the city and for current and future residents. And, I would also potentially in the future explore art and other ways to attract people to use it and enjoy it. You mentioned some ways to do that. I just want to say this right now. I just want to see this move forward. Thank you. And thank the people who worked on the ad hoc for this.
Thank you. I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak now. Any follow-up questions? Vice Mayor Stone, any comments?
No, I'll reserve my comments for when this comes back to council, but appreciate the commission taking this up and enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Darren, any further comments from staff?
No, just thank you to the ad hoc for working so closely with staff on this and look forward to connecting with the staff from the Palo Alto Historical Association soon.
Thank you. Okay. Next up on our agenda is the tree protection ordinance update review.
Chair, it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Gollinger. He's the city's urban forester with the Public Works Department. Thanks for being here, Peter.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for having us here tonight. I do have a brief presentation that I will go through before we start our discussion. Next slide. So just a brief timeline of the process. As most of you are aware, the ordinance was updated last July. In June, we presented some data and feedback on the first year of implementation to council. And tonight we're here based on direction from the original passage of the ordinance in July of 22. We were instructed after 1 year of implementation to bring discussion items back to Parks and Rec and PTC before proceeding with any additional changes or clarifications. So some of the key changes in the updated ordinance were expanded definitions of protected trees, changes and updates to allowable reasons for removal, a greater focus on maintenance of private protected trees, and revisions to the notification and appeals process, which was virtually non-existent in the last ordinance. The new version has a much more robust notification and appeals process. Next slide. Just for review, these are the current protected trees based on species. The 3 species that were protected previously under the old ordinance would be coast live oak, valley oak, and coast redwood. The largest change is the new protected species for mature trees at 15 inches in diameter. So this includes all other species except invasives and high water users. This is some data from our first year of implementation. These are tree removal permits outside of development. And you'll notice that under the first year of the ordinance, we had 117 total tree permit applications compared to the previous years of 60 and 66. We estimate for this calendar year, we'll have about 170 applications. Again, these are for protected tree removals outside of development. So these are not related to a project. Because of the storm season we had this year, 56 of those are due to storm damage, dead or dying. So there's a mixture in there. I think the key point on this slide is that 71% of the trees that were included in these permits are newly protected under the new ordinance. Next slide, please. One of the other key things that we implemented is notification of maintenance of protected trees. So this is a form that tree owners would fill out to notify the city that they are performing maintenance of a protected tree. This allows us to answer questions from the public when they come in. So far, we've had 77 notifications submitted for the first year that this has been in place. And we're working to get the word out to arborists and tree care companies that they should file these before they do their work. It's picking up. We've had a lot more this last month than in the previous month, so the word's spreading. So during the course of the first year of implementation, staff kept note of issues that came up. And so what we're bringing to you is our first stab at trying to resolve some of those issues that we encountered. There's 2 main types of changes. The first is changes to clarify the existing code. And the other is changes to the allowable reasons for protected tree removal. So some of the updates that we have proposed for clarity. There was some confusion regarding the designated arborist list. Again, this list is still in progress. It is not yet active. However, it was not clear when an applicant would choose the arborist and when the city chooses. So we changed some of the language to clarify that. We changed the wording for the definition for a designated tree. So a designated tree is a tree that was planted as part of a previously approved project. The language was unclear. It made it sound like it was for a current project. So when a project is complete and a tree is planted as part of that project, it becomes protected regardless of its size or species because it was required to be planted as part of a project. So we clarified that in our new language that we're proposing. We also clarified what type of tree removal permit is needed. Nowhere in our ordinance did we discuss that commercial properties require a staff level review from planning department for removal of a tree, protected tree. We don't handle that in public works. Because it's part of a larger project, those trees could have planning implications. They could be required screening, they could be important architecturally, so therefore planning needs to review those. And so that wasn't ever mentioned in our ordinance, so we added that to clarify that. We also clarified the 25% rule. This is when the protected root area of a tree takes up 25% of the buildable area of a lot. We clarified the calculation method on how we determine that. We also added some language to kind of clarify the development moratorium, which can be applied when trees are removed outside of development. Next slide. We are proposing some updates to the reasons for removal. So these are for outside of development. The existing code has a tree as a detriment to or crowding an adjacent protected tree in the same line as impacting the foundation or eaves of an existing residence. We felt it was imperative to split those apart because there are times when detriment to or crowding an adjacent protected tree could be used for a development project, whereas impacting the foundation or eaves of an existing residence should not be used for a development project. We also added a new reason, which we're going to explain on the next slide. It is at risk for retrenchment or other tree decline coping process, or is structurally incompatible with its immediate environment. So what is retrenchment, you ask? Next slide. So retrenchment is a tree coping mechanism that overmature trees sometimes undergo. Basically, the tree is trying to bonsai itself. So it is squirreling resources away from its extremities, and it starts to drop limbs and creates a lot of dead wood, but it may not be an immediate hazard. So the reason we've included this is to capture some of those older trees that have a higher level of risk, but are not technically hazards. So this would give us some leeway to allow those removal of those types of trees. When a tree is in a natural setting like this, retrenchment is a perfectly acceptable way for the tree to continue surviving. In a built-up environment, not so much. It doesn't really, a tree dropping limbs to cope with its elder age doesn't necessarily fit with a built-up environment. Next slide, please. We're also proposing some updates for tree removal as part of a residential project. So we have now added the detriment to or crowding an adjacent protected tree because we have proposing to separate that from the damage to eaves or foundations. And additionally, that risk for retrenchment or incompatible with its immediate environment. We're also proposing to add in the 25% rule. So this rule has been used in past practice on residential lots that undergo planning review. However, it was never specifically entered into the code in that area. So we're adding this here to address that oversight. We're also proposing some additional updates for non-residential projects. So these would be commercial projects, multifamily residential, large scale projects that undergo extensive review through planning. During the ordinance lead up to the passage of the ordinance back in 22, there was a lot of discussion about this category. Discussions with planning staff and urban forestry staff determined that the discretion to review those projects and approve the removal of protected trees was included in Title 18. Further review after the ordinance is passed, it didn't explicitly provide us that. It didn't explicitly deny us that. So we're adding a new reason in to capture that. Next slide, please. Additionally, we're including an exemption for excessive pruning. So there are some situations where the percentage definition for excessive pruning could be exceeded, and it would be arboriculturally sound. So trees that have been historically maintained as a hedge, or trees that have been maintained through pollarding or a similar process. As in that photo, those trees are pruned back annually to the same point every year. And so when that pruning is done, it would certainly exceed the excessive pruning requirements or minimum standards. However, it is an acceptable form of maintenance for those trees. Next slide. So that basically summarizes the proposed changes that staff has brought to you with specific language. Additionally, there are some additional actions that we could pursue if warranted. These could include things like elimination of one or more specific protected native species, increasing the diameter threshold for native species, increasing the diameter threshold for redwoods, or increasing the diameter threshold for the mature species. We could also consider additional changes to the allowable reasons for removal. Staff doesn't believe that's necessary at this time, but we wanted to make sure that everyone we presented this to realized that these are potential options that we could pursue. And just as a reminder, this is our estimated total number of trees in the urban forest. Now, this is based on a sample size of about 10,500 trees. You'll notice that under the old ordinance, we protected 81,720 trees. Under the new ordinance, it's approximately 225,000 trees, the majority of which would be under that mature category of 15 inches or greater, which would be 140,000. That is the largest increase under the new ordinance. Next slide. And just a reminder why we have an ordinance and why we're here is, of course, all the benefits that our urban forest provides. Primarily, it is our biggest tool against climate change, against carbon sequestration. It increases property values, reduces crime, on and on. There's studies upon studies about how valuable our tree canopy is to our urban environment. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you have. And if you want to go over anything specific, I have the report and the red line with me, so we can dive in if you have questions.
Thank you, Peter. In a moment, we'll go to members of the public who'd like to comment on this. If you're online, please raise your hand via Zoom or make sure you have a speaker card turned in here. I'd like to start with just a quick qualifying question and then invite other commissioners to ask specific qualifying questions before we go to public comment. So this really, your presentation and the staff report is kind of two sections. There's a staff recommendation of changes to the ordinance, which was passed last year. And then there's another section of additional areas for consideration that staff is not recommending at this time, but they're highlighting these as possibilities. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And okay, that's good for now. Any other qualifying questions? Joy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just curious to know what pollarding is. I don't know what it is.
So pollarding is a type of pruning where a tree, once it reaches the height you want it, the tree is pruned back to the same height every year. So the new growth each year is pruned off. Primarily, it's for shade. Often it's done with fruitless mulberries. There's some other tree species that are done that way. In France, they have large park areas that are covered with these type of trees. We actually have a sample of this behind the children's library. So if you ever want to see, we have some sycamores that are trimmed that way there.
Any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Would anything have changed, I guess, with the inventory and how trees are going to be managed with the major storms that we had last year, and then thinking going forward, is there any modifications that you feel need to be made?
Well, and that's some of these modifications are because of things that we encountered during the storms. Primarily that one reason for removal that I mentioned about retrenchment or incompatible with its immediate environment. That was meant to capture specific circumstances that we encountered during the course of this year, where the tree didn't quite meet reasons for removal, but it would be warranted. So that's our attempt to try and resolve some of those issues.
And you were looking at both residential and city trees, or residential, or only if it's something that was pointed out by the arborist?
So this is in general for all protected trees, but I would say that a lot of this is focused on private property protected trees. City street trees are maintained to the same standards. However, we're inspecting them on a regular basis, so we have we're a little more up to speed on what's going on with those. Whereas with private protected trees, we may not be, because they're in backyards or side yards, and we don't it's not our duty to maintain those, so.
Okay, thank you.
And there are no proposed changes to this section of the municipal code that deals with public trees and public protected trees?
No, we're only proposing edits to chapter 810 at this time. We're willing to entertain discussions about the other chapters, but everything that we encountered during the course of our implementation this year that needed clarity was in 810.
Thank you. One more clarifying question, which is also kind of framing it as well. This is a discussion item this evening. There is a potential policy recommendation in front of us. Is your expectation that this are recommendations via discussion would get incorporated by staff and then you would go to city council with that, or do you expect that you would return to the commission with a potential action for a policy change recommendation?
So the main reason we're here as a discussion, and we'll also be attending PTC next month as a discussion item as well, is based on council's direction when the ordinance was passed, was that we bring any proposed changes for discussion before those two boards at about the 1 year mark. I expect that any feedback or potential changes to our recommendations would be incorporated when we go to council in just tentatively in December. And I don't believe we're going to be bringing a votable item to them either. It's going to be, this is what we're proposing, and we're going to receive direction from them. At that point, they may direct us to come back to you with a voting item. Okay. Again, we're in the discussion phase. We don't want to rush into this. We want to make sure that any updates we make are thoughtful and well vetted out before we go that far.
Thank you. It's important for commissioners to understand what our goal and focus is this evening. Commissioner Kleinhaus, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. Can you clarify the 25% rule?
Yes. So the 25% rule can be used to remove a protected tree when the tree protection zone of that tree takes up more than 25% of the buildable area. The buildable area of a lot would be everything outside of the setbacks that are unbuildable. So on a residential lot, it would be that area where you could actually construct a house.
So if we have a beautiful ancient oak, that's exactly what will be taken out?
It depends on the site. And in areas where we've used it previously, it's been generally a substandard lot with a large redwood that was centrally located and impossible to build around. Many times we will work with a designer and be able to work around the protected tree without having to remove it. But this is one of those situations where it's a viable reason for removal when you have a tree that's impacting a property that dramatically.
And is the 25% a standard, like who came up with that and not like 40%?
I'm uncertain where that came from originally. It's been in our code for years. I would have to go back and see when it was enacted, but it was in the previous code before the update.
Okay, so we could say, 30%. Just saying, never mind. The other question I have is who, again, something that would probably disproportionately impact large trees is where they're structurally incompatible. Who makes the decision? And like for just kind of an example I'm familiar with on Ross, there is a pine tree that there was proposed to be removed and wasn't approved. Would that tree, you probably know that it has several trunks. Would that tree be removed under this structurally incompatible?
I'm not familiar with that specific situation. However, this is intended for situations where a private protected tree may be underneath the power lines and it's incompatible with that immediate environment. It could be a situation where a tree has very unusual or abnormal structure and it's impacting a home, but it's not technically a hazard. and it's not damaging the home, that would be a situation where this could be invoked. The decision would be made by the arborist doing the arborist report when it was submitted to us, and then we would be reviewing it as staff, and we would need to agree with their assessment. So
This is a concern because you can see that any tree that somebody wants to remove and doesn't fit any of the other boxes will go into, oh, it's structurally incompatible.
Yeah, excuse me, let's keep it to clarifying questions
Okay, sorry, yeah.
this time. Yeah. I did want to follow up on the question regarding the 25% rule. You said that this is something that's been in the code for a long time, but has it been in the code specifically with respect to single-family residence?
correct. Where it was in the code, it was being applied to all projects that went through planning. So if it went through entitlement, it was potentially used. However, a strict reading of the code would exclude residential projects even if they go through entitlement.
And could you dumb that down for us a little bit?
So projects can either go directly to building permit or they can go through planning, which requires them to get additional layers of approval. So if I'm not on the planning staff, but some of the things that would trigger a planning review would be going from a single story to a 2-story house. There's some other triggers as well, but that's the most common one that we review is remove and replace of a house that goes from a single story to a 2-story would require planning approval. Those would be the situations where the 25% rule was previously applied. However, it was technically not included in the ordinance because it was for that section under D, and that excludes all residential. So we're attempting to rectify something that was missed when we made the update.
So with respect to single-family residence, the 25% rule would only come into play for projects that go through planning review?
No, it would apply to projects that were residential.
So you're
either way.
So this is expanding the scope of where the 25% rule could apply with.
I would have to go back and look and make sure we've not used it in other scenarios. I just know that initially, when I first had the discussion about the history of the 25% rule with former city arborist Dave Doctor, that was when it was applied. It was applied to those projects where there was a large mature tree that went through planning approval and there was no other way to work around the tree.
Okay. Commissioner Wade?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Greenfield. I have a sort of related question more on the high level. So if we have removed the tree, would there be any, so the green coverage is reduced in that particular area? Is there any either policy or procedure to recover the vegetation or green coverage in that same area? So to ensure the biodiversity versus the density of the vegetation?
Yes, there are mitigation requirements in place. If you remove a tree in the course of development, you would have to replace the tree based on a canopy replacement strategy for complete canopy replacement in 15 years. So for instance, a tree that was 50 feet across, you would need to plant 6 24-inch box trees to replace that. Trees that are removed outside of development, we have a little more lenient replacement policy because those trees may legitimately need to be removed. However, we generally require at least a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 replacement outside of development.
So a smaller question. So the arborist employed to do the evaluation to make a decision or recommendation whether the tree should be removed, is that independent or is it part of a city staff?
That would be an independent arborist. It's an arborist hired by the applicant. And then we review the arborist report, the application, and do a site inspection.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks for the very detailed.
Yeah. Let's go to members of the public for comment. Yeah.
Chair, we have 3 hands raised online, 2 in person. JP, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is JP Renault, and I'm the Executive Director of Canopy. Before I make my comments, I want to take a moment to mention that I'm entering my 9th week on the job, and I want to thank this community for the warm welcome I've received. As we heard from our urban forester, the proposed red line changes in the ordinance have been suggested by staff after 1 year of practical observation. The proposed changes reflect experiences and situations that staff and residents have encountered this past year. We support these recommendations as they clarify several provisions critical to smooth implementation and better reflect the realities on the ground. We believe it would be premature and counterproductive to contemplate additional changes before seeing if these red line adjustments are adequate. Over the past year, especially during the challenging winter storms, Canopy heard much from our communities. There remains work to be done to understand the health of our drought-affected trees and where to prioritize ongoing care and tree work in our current environment. We want to thank our Urban Forestry Department for their thoughtful work this past year. Palo Alto is uniquely blessed in having a robust urban forestry department, and there is no question that we are a leader in this critical urban issue. Canopy invites continuing conversations with our community members about our tree canopy. We look forward to working with everyone involved to ensure we maintain healthy canopies and healthy communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Doria, I've seen your hand raised and go up and down. You are next to speak and you have been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
No, actually, I don't need to speak to this issue. I was going to speak to the previous item. So sorry to waste your time.
Our next speaker starts with the number 1415. You've been unmuted and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Am I online?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission and staff. My name is Geeta Dev. I am with the Sierra Club, Loma Prieta chapter. And I'm sorry I'm on the phone because my Zoom is not working for some reason. So hopefully this will work. I listened closely to this discussion about the tree canopy. And I have the following observation, which is that, first of all, these changes are being based on 1 year of observation, one very unusual year. Therefore, I would suggest that we move with caution. And while the staff recommendations are generally one that we feel are good, and we generally support them as common sense and reasonable. However, there are some areas that I have some concerns, and that is there are some suggested changes for protected trees, and they're very clear in the staff comment that these changes will definitely result in a reduction in the number of protected trees. Now, I will say that we do hold Palo Alto in special regard because of the tree canopy. And it's of great concern that there may be easier ways now for property owners, developers to remove inconvenient trees. And we have sat in on a number of meetings, and I'm sure you have too, where it would appear that the developer or the home builder could, or the architect, and believe me, I am an architect, so I speak from the heart. There are probably ways to do maybe a smaller envelope, but a nicer one because the tree is saved or the tree is trimmed. I feel that I would hope that you would consider very carefully any changes to the guidelines for protected trees that will reduce the number of protected trees, because in all our cities, and I sit in on a lot of other canopy issues, and I'm sure canopy itself can attest to this, we are losing trees at a greater rate than we are planting trees. So when you look at it from above, we are losing a lot of our greenery and our biodiversity. And Palo Alto, I hope, will be more enlightened than other cities are on this issue. Thank you.
Our next two speakers are in person. Leah, you've been unmuted and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Thank you so much for taking this up. I am one of the people who was impacted in March of last year. I was on the cover of the weekly. A tree, a large tree about maybe 4 or 5 stories tall, a 78-year-old Douglas fir, if I counted its rings correctly, crashed into my house right next to where I was sitting with my then 2-year-old daughter. And I had to grab her into my arms and run out the front door away from the tree as I saw it toppling toward me, thinking to myself, how far and how fast do I need to run to outrun a tree? I learned later I had been saying, we are safe, oh my God, we are safe, oh my God, because that's what my 2-year-old kept repeating for the next hour. She refused to sleep upstairs for the next 7 months. She only moved back upstairs 3 days ago. We are still working on repairs to our house. I had had 2 independent arborists come out to look at the tree. They both said it was healthy and there was no reason to remove it. I wasn't trying to build. I actually have a pre-existing structure that can be converted into an ADU, but I wasn't trying to do it at the time. I wanted the tree gone, not because I was certain it was a hazard. I'd been told by 2 arborists it was not. I wanted it gone because it was inconsistent with how I wanted to use my own private property. It was a Douglas fir, which drips sap all the time. That sap ruined my $2,000 trampoline. It ruined my brand new sofa that I had built or had bought when we moved into the house a year earlier. And I had received consultation and quotes from companies to have it removed. And then I called the city to ask if I needed a permit because nobody would remove it unless I ascertained whether or not the city decided I needed a permit. At the time I asked, I did not need one, but the city slow walked getting back to me by responding only with questions. After the ordinance went into effect, 3 weeks after my initial email, they said, oh, by the way, you might be interested in the ordinance that went into effect yesterday. And you shouldn't apply for a permit because your tree will not receive one. So my house, as I told you when I spoke at City Council when they considered this a few months ago, my data point for my tree is not included in the data set of the staff report you just saw because I was discouraged from applying for a permit. So the number of permits received doesn't have anything to do with the number of people who want to remove trees on their property. So I invite you to please use a very skeptical eye when you look over the data from the staff report. Additionally, it's really important to acknowledge that the risk cannot be ascertained by independent consulting arborists. This ordinance shifts the risk to private homeowners, and it is an unknown, unknowable risk, and yet it is unwanted and preventable. It's not like choosing to go out and drive my car without using my seatbelt. I had no choice. I was not allowed to remove this tree. I beg you, please think very carefully about the purposes of this ordinance. If it's climate change, you are protecting an aging, ancient forest that was not planted with the goal of mitigating climate change. It is not the flexible forest that we need, and it is putting families at risk. Thank you.
Our next speaker is John. John, you have 3 minutes.
Chair Greenfield, commissioners, I don't really know where to begin with this because I've been speaking not to your commission, but to the council about this for about 15 months now. And I have a lot of experience seeing how this works on a day-to-day basis. particularly with regard to ADUs. And I sense that there's a considerable difference in values between my values and those of the urban forester and probably of you as well. So I will just try to let you know where I'm coming from, and I'll begin by associating myself with Leah's remarks. I want to go back to what former council member and former mayor Eric Filseth asked when this ordinance was being considered by the council in 2022. And he asked some difficult questions, and I think the urban forester gave some very candid responses to that. He was basically asking, what's the problem that we're trying to solve and how much is it going to cost? And this year, rather than last year, we actually have some numbers. So I believe, if I understand the numbers that the urban forester presented, there's, you know, what I think of as about 140,000 new trees, which have been added to the inventory. And as a result of the regulation that we've imposed, there are about 100 new trees that are kind of going through the process. And I hope I did my math right, but if I did, what I'm hearing is that we've now got a process which has certain costs, and it's changed how we do things by about less than 0.1%. And I think if you actually go and look at the growth of the canopy, if you're really talking about this from a climate perspective, and I'd be happy to have that discussion about where there are trade-offs and how we combat catastrophic global warming. But it just doesn't seem like we're really dealing with that many trees. And when we look at the cost, Mr. Renault, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name correctly. He's new to the job, but I think if you add in the money that's going to canopy, plus the staff time, plus the unarticulated planning staff time, we're probably talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars per overall costs. And the numbers that I was getting to were probably on the order of, say, $2,000 to $3,000 per tree. Now, you may think that's a good use of resources to deal with climate-related issues. I disagree. I'm out of time. I would have a lot more to say about ADUs and about why homeowners are being asked to sign something when they're trying to build an ADU that refers to criminal penalties, but I'll have to write to you or to some other body about that. Thank you.
Thank you to the members of the public who've joined us this evening to speak and share their stories, and to those who've joined us online. Appreciate your comments, and they help inform us and shape our discussion. As a member of, as part of the urban forestry liaison group, I did meet with Peter, the urban forester, to review the tree ordinance in advance, along with the chair of the Planning and Transportation Commission. I think, I mean, there's a lot here. This is difficult stuff. This is not something that just happened overnight. It's thick and dense and complicated. I think overall, staff recommendations are very common sense and taking a very pragmatic approach to addressing real issues that came up, shortcomings in the initial ordinance change. Bear in mind the Chapter 8 tree ordinance had not changed appreciably in over 20 years. So it's a major overhaul that was approved last year after a year and a half or so of strenuous effort working on the changes. I think staff has done a good job in developing the new processes and improving clarity in the ordinance. I think the updates overall are balanced. There is a lot more flexibility for the urban forester to permit new tree removals in specific cases, or in a range of cases that they have as I understand it, and Peter, please confirm, how would you characterize the flexibility that you now have?
I think what we've done is we've tried to capture those situations that we encountered where we felt this tree should probably be removed, but we couldn't connect the dots to make it meet a specific item in the ordinance. Again, those are kind of rare, but we did come across a few of them. Most notably, one was a severely misshapen tree that was overhanging a property, and their insurance had an issue with it, but we couldn't really classify it as a hazard because it didn't meet any of the technically required items that would make it a hazard. It was a stable tree. But again, that was one of those situations where it was incompatible with its immediate environment. So that would have been, we would have been allowed to remove it under this proposed changes.
Thank you. So overall, I am supportive of the recommendation which staff is putting forward. There are some question marks about the 25% rule as it applies to single family residents, but I understand that it is by and large codifying how staff had been practicing interpretation for some time. I did appreciate the comment from Gita from the Sierra Club about and from Canopy to move forward cautiously. This past year has not been a typical year. It may become a more typical year moving forward, but I think we need to look at what we're valuing, and maybe Peter, you could put back up the slide that explains why we're doing this. What are outlining the benefits of the trees, and this is a value judgment. So these are, I think, as a community, Palo Alto values its trees and cherishes its trees, and here's an outline of a number of the reasons why. I do think it's I do not support the potential other changes that were outlined in the staff report. I think there's 4 sections of they can be divided into 4 sections. One is addressing the number of protected species. I think the primary addition to that list that's adding the most trees, a couple thousand trees, is the incense cedar, and that's effectively our redwood replacement tree. And the second category is redwoods themselves, and obviously a beloved tree in our community. Our city was named after one. The reality is it's not ideally suited to most of the urban ecosystems here, particularly considering climate change, and for that reason, it's not a tree that the city recommends planting at this point, but we're doing our best to preserve the ones that we have. The third category is changing the protected tree diameter guideline. And Peter, could you, and this is set at 15 inches for quote good trees that aren't water guzzlers and trees that aren't invasive. Could you comment on how this compares with other communities, please?
Yeah, so we did do some research before the ordinance was passed to kind of take a survey of what our neighboring municipalities were protecting. We've since gone back and done that again because there has been some changes to our neighbors since we started working on this ordinance. The ordinance took about 3 years to get before council, so there definitely was some changes in some of our neighbors. Currently, Menlo Park protects oaks at 10 inch and all other trees at 15 inch. East Palo Alto, it's 8 inches or greater. Los Altos is 15 inches or greater, all mature trees. Mountain View, it's 15 inches or greater. Redwood City, It looks like it's 38 inches in circumference, which is 12 inches in diameter. Sunnyvale is 12 inches. Atherton is 15.2 inches. San Carlos is 11 inches and Belmont is 14 inches.
So we're not an
Yeah.
outlier here.
No.
We were an outlier before the ordinance was changed in the opposite direction.
Correct.
So what we're looking at is very consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods.
Well, and one of the questions that came up during this was, is there still a problem? Is there a problem we're trying to solve? And we're in the midst of getting some additional, more up-to-date satellite data that's going to show us the canopy percentage of down to a neighborhood or even a property detail. And initial results look like we gained canopy between 2010 and 2020, but we have leveled out or in some cases lost canopy since 2020. So again, those results aren't final. I don't feel comfortable sharing that, but the initial review of what I've seen doesn't, I'm not happy with it. We need to be growing our canopy. That's part of our sustainability plan. We have a goal of reaching 40% citywide. And if we're not going to continue to protect and grow our trees, plant more trees, we're not going to be able to get there. So I do believe that there is still a problem. Hopefully I'll have some hard data when we come to council. Right now, I'm still working with the GIS guys to get.
Thank you. I think as all commissioners here, I feel for the ordeal that Ms. Russin continues to live through. It's not something that any of us would wish on anyone. It was it's a harrowing event, and Peter, how would you describe that event, and how does that apply to the tree ordinance? It's a difficult question, but it's something that I think we're all interested in understanding better.
Definitely, and first of all, Ms. Russin definitely has our apologies for what happened. I did review some of the exchanges and we were not prompt in our responses. So that is an issue. I also didn't feel like what we were being asked was very clear. So there was some confusion there. Again, it's an unfortunate situation. I'm hoping that the changes we made to the ordinance would potentially impact situations like hers in the future. That tree might have qualified for the 25% rule, or it might have qualified for incompatible with the immediate environment. I can't guarantee that because I didn't inspect the tree. I didn't look at the tree. So I've only seen the photos, and again, she is correct. There is no way to have zero risk when you live with trees. There's always going to be some level of risk with trees, just as there's going to be some level of risk when you walk down the street or get in your car. It's part of life. There's no way to remove risk, absolutely. However, having an inspection done by a trained arborist, most of the time you can determine if there's potential problems or not. Generally, that doesn't anticipate 70-mile-an-hour winds from non-prevailing directions. It's just not something we normally deal with. And again, it's a horrible situation, and I wish I had better answer for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Kleinhaus, as the other urban forestry liaison.
I don't think I am, but I had a couple of questions that I was hoping to ask before. But when you say that there is mitigation ratios, and if somebody removes a tree, they have to plant, plant trees instead to compensate for the loss. Do they actually have to plant the trees, or they pay a fee for the city to plant trees?
It depends on the specific site. When we're doing a development review, we do our best to encourage that as many trees as possible are planted on the site. However, our landscape architect and our arborist that does our development review do acknowledge that there are certain situations where we cannot fit more trees on a property. In those instances, they would pay an in lieu fee into our forestry fund, which then we use to finance tree planting.
Thank you. So in some of the cities, neighboring cities, they have this kind of system of in lieu payment into a fund that is expected to plant trees. And unfortunately, they don't have anywhere to plant the trees. So Mountain View, San Jose, there's other situations where they have a lot of money in that fund, but there is no place to plant the trees. Do we have place to plant trees?
So I think that there's always room to find places to plant trees. I would say, at least in the public right of way, we're getting to be where our inventory locations are diminishing. Oftentimes a tree is removed and we discover that there are utilities directly underneath it, and it's not in our best interest to replant directly on top of it. So sometimes we have an obsolete site out there. As of right now, we have not had tremendous difficulty finding spots to plant trees. So far, that's not a big issue with us.
Thank you. And the last question is that also something that I see quite frequently in other cities where large mature trees are replaced with a couple of crepe myrtles or, some small shrubby tree instead of a large, mature, beautiful tree. So do we encounter those kind of situations as well?
Generally, no. We usually specify. So if a native oak is removed, we usually require at least one of the replacement trees to be a native oak. We generally specify as large of canopy as possible for the space available. It would be a very unusual circumstance where we would accept, for instance, a red bud to replace a much larger tree. I don't think that would happen unless there was no other alternative. In general, we require a similar or larger replacement to what was removed.
Thank you. So similar to the comments made by the chair, I support the staff recommendations, even though I think you might want to consider changing the incompatible with the immediate environment to something that is a little more, some kind of a special exception that doesn't really describe what that exception might be, because then you have a lot more, and I don't know, legally you might want to discuss with our attorneys, but it may be easier to look at exceptions if there is no name that a lot of different exceptions can say, oh yeah, I fit in there easily. I share the concerns by the Sierra Club, and I am not interested in seeing changes to the protected tree list. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Nellis?
Listening to some of the comments, especially from the Canopy and also from Sierra, on the fact that we need to, approach this rather cautiously. Going back to the storm, I think, you have data that you can look at. I'm sure that there's, satellite images before the storms. You've got satellite images after the storm. Would be interested to know if there's been a deep dive into why we had so many trees that were, that came down during that time, and what, going forward, what could be done to sort of, not saying that's something that's not going to happen again. We don't know, right? With climate change and looking at what we might have to deal with. And I would think trying to be as prepared as we can with that, whether or not you've been able to come up with some suggested changes that might sort of maybe not totally eliminate what happened, but try and prevent some of it from happening.
So I think in general, in relation to our city maintained trees, we were very well prepared despite how many limb pickups and tree removals we had to do. It was far less than some other municipalities. I think our maintenance program prepares our trees for this. I think what happened during the storm season was something that, I mean, we've talked about it before. We had 4 of the highest recorded historic flows on San Francisco Creek in that 3-month period. So for the 30 years we've been keeping records, or however long it is, there's 4 of the highest flows. Actually, I think it goes back farther than that. So the combination of the very saturated soils with no break between storms and the 70-mile-an-hour winds coming from non-prevailing directions, it's even healthy trees can't withstand that. So I don't know that there's anything specific we could do. We are, as usual this year, like we do every year, we have meetings before the storm season where we kind of game plan as a department amongst ourselves what our priorities are and what needs to be addressed before we have our first storms. And we stage our resources appropriately. So we're out there cleaning storm drains and doing all those things now in advance of those big storms. So it's a regular occurrence for us every year. We do storm preparedness before we lead up. And I think because of that, we were able to respond quickly, and what incidents we had would have been far worse if we didn't already have that as a process.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and update. I just want to start by saying that I'm supportive of the cleanup recommendations from staff. I think it's not only have you been rolling out a new ordinance change, but also taking input to make these modifications while there's this giant storm going on with a new problem. So I would caution us to make too many changes right now, like some of the other public speakers, and really focus staff's resources on educating these changes, making the public aware, providing good customer service, so timely responses and outreach, and see how the ordinance is after we give it that dedication and time that it deserves. I do have one question, and I couldn't find it in the document. What is the definition or criteria for structurally incompatible?
So there is no specific definition of that in the ordinance as it is.
Would that be something that would be in the tree technical manual, or would it be defined in the Muni code directly? I just worry about that being applied inconsistently.
Understood, and that is a concern. It is something that we could be more specific with in the tree technical manual. Again, this is our first attempt to kind of capture some of those issues that we've encountered, and it may need some additional cleanup work.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Gosh, thank you. This is all very complicated and certainly set in the last year. It's even more complicated. So I just have some random thoughts. First of all, I appreciate the caution that everybody is wanting to exercise moving forward, because I think it's maybe not great to base new decisions on something that happened last year. Was crazy, obviously. And as an aside, I feel like, first of all, we love Palo Alto trees, and everybody in Palo Alto, I want to think, loves their trees. And I feel like if somebody who's a resident, and this is probably really naive, has a feeling that maybe they need to take out a tree, that we really need to provide some flexibility for that particular position from a personal point of view. And this wasn't in Palo Alto, but in a venue I am responsible for in East Palo Alto. We lost the most beautiful oak tree that you could ever imagine, probably more than 100 years old. 2 arborists came to me 2 weeks before the storm and said, this tree's fine, it just needs some limbs pruned. And it wasn't fine. And luckily it fell over at a time when nobody was in school. And the only things that were hurt were picnic benches that were shriveled into little splinters. But we have moved ahead with Canopy's help, and we have replaced that giant oak tree with 6 trees that will eventually grow up and provide, we hope, not the same thing, but another kind of a canopy. So I want to believe that that happens for people who want to remove a tree, and they will, in fact, then plant new trees in their place. And as I said, I could be naive about it. The last thing I wanted to say is that I'm really interested, and this is probably not as part of the ordinance, but in the kind of community service or public service we're providing to our neighbors in our community who have endured going through this past year. So for the future, how long does it take to get the permit to get rid of the tree once it's fallen over on your house and that kind of thing. So, but thank you very much for all of this, because I really want to say that this is incredibly complicated, and I'm just trying to listen to it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Oche.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing the presentation and also your research data points from other cities as well. Thank you for that. My heart goes out to you, Leah, for your experience. Nobody wants that to happen to them, right? I also want to echo what the Vice Chair said in terms of us focusing more on better awareness for what the tree ordinance is right now. I think that would go a long, long way to, better educate residents on what is currently in the ordinance. So that way we can get more feedback on from residents as well. I'm just curious to ask what the cadence for inspection is. Inspection of trees, like the tree health and things like that. What's the cadence?
In regards to private trees or street trees?
Street trees, and also, for example, we've heard over and over, like, Commissioner Cripps talked about an oak tree that fell, just to, find ways we can close the gap and prevent, impacts like that from happening again. I'm just curious to know, do we, check right before storms and after storms? What's the cadence?
So as far as private protected trees, we don't personally inspect those unless we're called by a resident with a concern. During like a storm event, we will often have people out in the field, and they might be able to come by and take a look. Obviously, we can't go look at everybody's tree all the time for every question, but if there's somebody who thinks they have an emergency, we will come take a look. So in those instances, they wouldn't necessarily need to have an arborist condemn the tree. We could see that we are arborists out in the field. So in the case of an imminent emergency, we could give them an immediate permit. So that wouldn't be an issue. As far as inspection before or after the storm, we do that on our city trees, on street trees.
I see.
So they are inspected relatively regularly. I don't know if I have we don't have a specific program. However, we have crews out in the field all throughout town, and they are constantly looking at the trees near where their work site is and looking for hazards. Our maintenance cycle is between 5 and 7 years. So we're there every 5 years or so pruning those trees.
Okay, thank you. So there's like a tracking schedule? Is that what
There's a tracking schedule for pruning and maintenance.
Okay.
And we do log inspections, but we don't have a specific inspection cycle for all trees. We're out in the field constantly checking on issues and responding to customer concerns and requests. And so we lay eyes on trees on a regular basis.
Thank you. I'm asking because I just wonder if there's like, risk categories, like categorizing trees, so that way there might be alerts to be able to tell the team?
Yeah, in certain circumstances, we can prioritize which trees on a street we're going to remove first based on their maturity, like they're beginning to reach the end of their useful lifespan. And so we may start thinking about succession planting or eventual removal. We're in the middle of a case study right now on a particular cul-de-sac where we've done in-depth inspections of all the trees on the block, and we're making a succession plan to try and replant in locations next to those trees before they're removed. Hopefully, if this case study works, we can expand it to other parts of the city. But this was just an initial trial run to see how this would work. The issue we're running into is there's not a lot of available planting area next to these trees.
Awesome. So do residents have guidance on how to know when to call for an emergency, kind of? How would they know when, they need to call? I'm just curious to know.
So we did update our frequently asked questions during the storm season, and we tried to push that out through some of our social media stuff through the communications manager. We also have that available on the Canopy website, where they talk about what to do in the case of storms and how to maintain your trees before and after storms. So we do have those resources available on both our website and Canopy's website.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Bing.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for the great presentation. And I actually went through a bit of mourning period, losing losing our tree on our property because the trees invaded into the house. So we actually kept some of the tree trunks as part of it. It's almost like a loss of pets because it's been there for so long. And I do agree with you. The urban canopy is really important, and appreciate the canopy new ED's commentary too. But at the same time, and empathize Leah's suffering going through that. I'm wondering, in the maintenance for trees, is there two questions? One is there certain methods or process to reinforce a tree which is not yet dead, cannot be removed, but may cause danger? And the second question is, you mentioned about sort of following up Commissioner Ochi's question about the information how to avoid the danger of the trees during a storm. With the climate change, there might be more storms. Is there, say, training sessions, etc.? You might be, I know you're already probably out of bandwidth, give people some even online information session once a year before the storming time, say before Thanksgiving, to let people, alert people on what could be done. Or does the city have a helpline to call in, not like 911 or something, they can actually get immediate help for them if they experience the tree falling and the children involved as well?
So we do have, like I mentioned before, we do have those tree care guidelines that advise what to do before storm season and after a storm. We have not considered doing a webinar or a studies or a public training on those. That is something that we could explore. As far as reporting incidents, I believe if it's an emergency, I'd have to go look at our guidelines, but I think if it's a serious emergency, you need to call 911. If it's something that might be an emergency and it's involving a city street tree, you can call Public Works and we will get somebody out there. I believe the guidelines are in our frequently asked questions as to who to call and when to call. I didn't print those out tonight, I don't think.
But if it's there, that's good to know. Maybe also frequently see them in Palata Weekly or the community websites and news. That might be great. And we just had the Youth Council presenting. Just another thought is they have a newsletter. Maybe we can put that into their newsletter too. I really impressed of the great work you're doing, just thinking of the amount of trees you guys are looking after. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I have a couple follow-up questions and quick comment. I outlined the 3 of the 4 different areas of potential additional actions, but the last one I didn't touch on was the protected tree categories, which is probably the most important one to maintain, and that's continuing protection of designated trees and whether it's a tree designated for protection or carbon sequestration and replacement mitigation trees, all the actions based on maintaining in response to development projects and maintaining our canopy and ensuring the proper replacements of trees. Kind of a general question I have is, given all of the impacts of the winter storms we went through, is there any way to connect the dots and is there a direct correlation for actions the city could take that would change protected trees to help the situation beyond what you've done in terms of the changes to give you more flexibility in issuing tree removal permits, but specifically, would any changes to the number and classifications of protected trees have any impact here?
I don't think that would have directly impacted what happened during the storms. I don't think, like I said, I think what we've tried to capture in the draft is what we can do to address those kinds of issues. I don't think changing the classifications would have a dramatic impact on that. So changing what type of trees are protected, I don't think any tweaks to that would have a dramatic impact on that directly.
Okay, and that's, I guess, consistent with the staff recommendation which doesn't include changing the number of protected trees. Canopy is a core environmental partner for our city. Full disclosure, I serve on the advisory board for Canopy. Could you talk about what our community receives from Canopy, given the modest contract that we have with the nonprofit organization?
Yeah, so some of the services that Canopy provides us as part of our agreement is they serve as an information resource for residents on anything having to do with trees. If you want to know how to maintain your trees, you can call up Canopy, check their website. They have lots of information on how to maintain trees, how to plant trees, where to plant trees, what type of trees to plant, how to select the right type of tree. They can also provide lots of specific information if you need to speak with them personally. They often will come out and meet with you to discuss the planting site. They do tree health surveys on newly planted trees, and they provide us with a report annually, which we can then take as an actionable item to go help maintain those trees to ensure that they survive their first few years of life. They train up multiple people that go out and do this work for them, both volunteers and paid staff. They're in the middle of finishing up the great oak count, which once we have that data, I think will be hugely valuable to mapping where our oaks are and our oak resources are in the city. The list goes on. They do lots of stuff having to do with trees.
And could you touch on the role of Canopy relative to the role of the urban forestry staff? But your staff is able to manage some things. Is Canopy,
yes, yeah.
Is Canopy more of an extension of staff, or?
So in general, beyond those kind of core services that they provide, they've also been instrumental in implementing certain aspects of our urban forest master plan. So they've worked on the preferred and restricted species list, which has to do with what trees should and should not be planted in the city. And that is currently being incorporated into their tree selection tool. So in the near future, results from this tool will have those results incorporated. They've also, again, that great oak count that I referenced earlier is part of our urban forest master plan. They've assisted us in implementation of a lot of those projects that we just don't have the bandwidth or staff to address.
Thank you. Do other commissioners have follow-up questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to tap in to what you just said there about how, I guess it sounds like there's a partnership that exists with Canopy. I'm just wondering if some of the gaps that we've talked about as far as providing educational resources and information to our residents, especially, we keep going back to what happened, but there's a lot of sort of unknowns and questions that are out there. I think where people are wondering, what can I do to prevent something like this from happening again, and wanting to go to the experts for that type of advice rather than, calling an arbitrist or whatever and getting misinformation. And I could say that's, I think we've all had experience where someone will come out and take a look at a tree and say, yeah, it's in perfect condition. And, not being an expert ourselves, or go, I don't know why. It's one of the reasons I call you. But just wondering if there's a way that your organization and tapping some of the resources that work with you can be used to help, kind of like what the utility company does as far as, if you suspect there's a gas leak or something of that nature, someone we can call for advice. I'm not necessarily reading an FAQ or whatever it might be, but maybe having things like workshops and those types of things that people can attend and get more information so that we can be better prepared in the event that there's some type of situation that reoccurs.
And that's definitely something we can look into. Canopy does do a lot of educational outreach currently, and we can discuss maybe a storm preparedness specific item to be prepared and worked on in the coming months. But that is something that they do as part of our partner, is they do a lot of education and outreach. So.
Other commissioners? Any further comments from staff, Darren?
Just to acknowledge the whole urban forest team, Peter in particular, for their always supportive role that they play with community services needs regarding trees and parks and open space. They're just fantastic. So just want to thank them sincerely for everything you do.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the discussion tonight. I think clear this is a really complex issue with a lot of competing interests on both sides. Hearing that from the public, understandably, as well as just pressure on the city of housing development and other issues, kind of restricting local control on and we've received feedback from the state on our recent housing element about potential impacts of our tree ordinance on that. And so, but of course, the need to also promote our sustainability and climate action plan and the impact that trees play there, as well as just preserving the canopy for quality of life in Palo Alto that so many of us depend on. And so I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I think council is going to really value the dialogue as well as the questions tonight. So I'm interested to see how this moves forward, but I appreciate everybody's work on this.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us this evening, as always. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate all the time and dedication you put into this. Our city is very fortunate to have an urban forester as part of staff, and I appreciate all the efforts and the efforts of your team. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the feedback from everyone tonight.
Thank you. Okay. Next up on our home stretch, Commissioner, Board Member, Ad Hoc Committee and Liaison Updates. Let's try to work through this efficiently. Who has updates? Ann?
I have several quickly. I'm a liaison for the funding partners, so that would be Palo Alto Recreation Foundation and the Friends of the Palo Alto Park. the Recreation Foundation currently will continue to fund the things that they have funded in the past, the city programs around Halloween and Easter and Mayfay Parade and the Chili Cook-Off. Parks has nothing to report yet. There's no bucket yet for skateboarding. So Darren, I'm assuming once the traffic study is done, then they'll be able to put that through. And the chair of the park said that they are looking to do new signs for the interpretive center at Foothill Park to get more people to know that that's an interpretive center. So that's great, I thought. In terms of, Nellis, did you have the Goff update?
Yeah, I do have a sort of a quick one, I guess, and that is that the city staff is continuing to work with the ecological consultant, I guess, on developing a plan to get in compliance with the requirements of the state water board, but we don't have, I didn't receive anything, I guess, Darren, on that as what the timeline might be. Did say that we can expect the plan with the water board, the consultant worked with the water board in the next couple of weeks, but that didn't really come up with a timeline. So I imagine we're talking about before the end of the year, correct? Yes. Okay. And then golf course play in the first quarter of fiscal year 2024, so I guess is up 3% comparison to the last year. So that's an improvement. And I think that's all I have, I believe.
I think that Bing and I can talk, Commissioner Wake and I can talk about grants quickly. We had a very good meeting with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and one of their principals, Leticia Gonzalez. We were trying to understand what grant opportunities existed for cities like Palo Alto, who sometimes have a perception that we're not in need of any grants. So we were asked to give them 3 ideas, which we did. One was city restrooms by the Magical Bridge, a small museum and a redo of the interpretive center. And then the big one for Buckeye Creek, which we've always been looking at, have been looking at that for a couple of years. And so we'll be sending that off to our contact there, and she will share that with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. We also will be, why don't you talk about the event that we attended with the Community Foundation?
Yeah, we also went to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation annual event, and it was an interesting session in terms of their civic engagement versus diversity of giving grants. So we met a few people who are from different foundations in the Bay Area and are looking to further. And in the meanwhile, while I was doing a business trip in the East Coast, I also met with one of the Japanese conglomerates, which has an office in Palo Alto, and their corporate social responsibility sectors looking to education and environmental self-improvement. So their budget year is April each year. So hopefully Q1 2024, I can re-engage them as a conversation to see if there's anything we can get from their local office here. So that's all grant.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Chair, could I also give a brief thank you about the Recreation Wellness Center? So it's actually in November, it'll be 2 years since the commission heard the first presentation about the Recreation Wellness Center. And we will be hearing from the staff. Darren, I believe you and Kristen are going to have a meeting to talk about scheduling the new community outreach. I have to say personally, I was really disappointed that Peter's excitement wasn't able to continue on, that he had been taken off the project. So he had great ideas, and I hope that some of his ideas are incorporated in the PowerPoint that I think that we'll be using.
Can I ask a question? Was there a community meeting recently or not? It hasn't
No, there has not been anything.
We haven't gotten there yet. Others?
That's what I got.
I can chime in with some things, to inspire some others to speak. Perhaps the, what are we calling this? The group, the playing field policy and projects group has met with staff to review some of the potential options for synthetic field replacement, and as well as a survey of the materials used for a number of fields in the area, and staff is actively continuing research on this and looking to clarify what our choices would be. Staff has clarified the timeline for replacement of both the synthetic turf at El Camino Park and at Mayfield. And for El Camino Park, we're looking at the spring of next year, sometime in the March to May timeline when it's not going to be raining, which is an important factor. And then Mayfield will be, assuming that the budget comes through, it would be funded next fiscal year, beginning July. And so we'd be ideally aiming to have the work done in the July, August, September timeframe. I recently attended a leadership Palo Alto panel discussion. I was joined by some other board and commission chairs, and this was part of their city government day, and we spent time talking about our role and experience on the commission, and trying to drum up interest for other people to consider participating in boards and commissions. There's a meeting coming up regarding the Baylands Tidegate modified project. This is with Valley Water. This is a scaled down project of what had previously been intended, and looking forward to hearing about that. Tomorrow, there's a meeting, I'll be joined by Commissioner Oche, meeting to hear about potential plans for GSI at Briones Park. The master plan ad hoc has been meeting regularly, working towards getting our arms around the big monster of the master plan and how to optimize the staff input and move forward with some plans, and look to be coming to the commission next month with some ideas and thoughts. That's all I've got. Others? Okay.
I can go quickly.
Any other? If there are no other updates on the ad hocs and liaison roles, we'll move.
I can go quickly.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm
quickly.
sorry.
Yeah. So for recreation programs ad hoc, we're yet to do the deep dive that Commissioner Wei and I are planning to do. But we're hoping we can also explore the opportunity you mentioned today about the the PYC, providing some kind of support to help us to achieve that. For the Youth Council, we heard from them today, and in the coming weeks, we plan to better engage them. Commissioner Wei was able to attend one of their meetings, like she mentioned earlier on. Hopefully, we plan to kind of divide and conquer to attend their meetings, so we can, maintain that, maintain a better engagement, and also bring back word from them, so we close that gap that we've had previously. Okay, also adding to what you mentioned before, we'll be having a meeting tomorrow with our city's stormwater compliance program manager, to install a green stormwater infrastructure, GSI, for those of us who don't know the meaning of the acronym, at the Briones Park. And hopefully we'll be able to report back to the commission next month, hopefully. No updates from our plans for ISI or pursuing awards for any project yet, but hopefully in the coming weeks, I will pursue that, follow up, and get back to the commission on any updates that we have concerning that. Thank you. I don't know if Commissioner Way wants to add anything.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree with Commissioner Ocean's update on the Youth Council side, and we plan to take our own alternate months every other month so we can attend their meetings, keep the engagement, and also deliver our promise, maybe engage them for social media as well. We also plan to map out the recreation program to provide our thoughts and suggestions for the work plan. So for the master work plan before November meeting. So that's all I have to update.
Thank you. Anyone else with updates before we move on? Okay, then we'll move on to Commissioner Board and Board Member questions, comments, announcements, and then talk about our our upcoming agenda. Any questions, comments, or announcements before we move on to the agenda?
Yeah, I have one announcement. I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw the Grassroots Ecology 2022 to 23 annual report that appeared in my mailbox. I think it's terrific. And if you haven't gotten one, it's probably online, or you can probably get one, but they do a lot of great work. And I just wanted to commend them for this.
Thank you. Then let's move on to agenda. There's no further announcements.
My chair, we've got the potential park dedication ordinance for the Tower Well, depending on how the conversation goes with the naming, and the Parks Master Plan review, also pending the ad hoc's concurrence that one's ready. And then I think those are the ones I know of that are highly likely.
And how about the rec programs reviewed? Commissioner Oche and Way, is that something that you would be in a position to present something to the commission next month in conjunction with the master plan review as well, or?
I would suggest or recommend December or January.
December,
Yes,
January,
please.
okay.
What are your thoughts, Commissioner Way?
Yeah, I think January would be a good time actually after Commissioner Ochi and I observed, enough meetings and understanding what the youth want in terms of recreation. And after we had meetings with the city staff as well. If that timeline works with the master plan team, would that be okay with you, Chair Greenfield?
Yes, I think December, or so you're saying probably not December, more likely January.
Yeah, more likely January, yeah.
Yep. I think we can work with that. So, Darren, what's the status on the Foothills PIO?
I have a meeting tomorrow to discuss with planning and transportation what the next steps will be for that. So I'll have more information for the ad hoc on that one after tomorrow.
And do you think that's a possibility for this year?
I hope so. I hope that we can get it on the December agenda. It's my hope.
Okay. And it sounds like the Wellness Center is.
That was what I was just going to ask. What's your thought about the Wellness Center?
It's really about staff that we can assign there in the absence of the support that we had from Public Works Engineering. So yeah, that meeting that Kristen mentioned, that we'll be brainstorming out how we can make some progress here with the people we have.
So Peter is off of.
Peter's got other priority projects that he's working on and cannot dedicate his time to this one at this point.
Given that status, I'm definitely sensing some consternation from the ad hoc that they would like to be able to present something to the commission. I guess I'll leave it to the ad hoc and staff to decide if there is something appropriate to share with us. I do think it's important for the ad hocs to share whatever they have with the commission on a regular basis. And that might, that thought alone, keep that in mind when you're considering whether or not there's something to bring to the commission next month. And what about e-bikes?
E-bikes is pending a meeting. We still have a need to meet with the ad hoc and staff to work through a few things. It's in my camp to schedule that meeting with Commissioners Kleinhaus and Freeman. So I'll put that together.
Yeah, I think we have one last
Just Restradero.
tour, I guess it is.
Yeah,
For Restradero.
Yeah, so we're getting closer.
Yeah.
Also at a Restradero, in addition to the bike rack element that we want to look at, there's also the other directive from council, which is, are there any trails that should be changed in terms of their use? And I think we just need to get to agreement on that between staff and the ad hoc and discuss that one, which we haven't gotten fully into yet. So we'll see how long that takes. But I think the meeting can happen soon. Within the next week and a half, I think it's reasonable for us to get together and make that happen. I was also hoping to see if you'd be open to doing it remotely. So I'll email you both and Commissioner Kleinhaus to discuss that one.
So is there a possibility that that would be ready to come to the commission with an update next month or December?
It's possible. Yeah. November or December, I think, seemed possible to me.
Okay. Again, the same story would be good to hear an update. After meeting with Pam Boyle Rodriguez tomorrow, we can better understand if she'd be looking to present to the commission soon with the green stormwater infrastructure GSI plan for, and the information we have is she's been looking at the parks to implement it in, and Briones looks like a good possibility. So that's a possibility perhaps. And what about grant opportunities? Is that something that you'd be looking to present to the commission? Just think about December, January.
Excuse me, December or January, I think we could certainly do something.
Okay, great.
We may not have a grant, but we could at least talk about it.
Sounds great. Anything else?
Should we decide on a meeting date in December?
Excellent question.
December 19th is what we had tentatively agreed on.
The 19th?
Mm-hmm. Siobhan, can you clarify if we put a hold on that date? We did, yeah.
And being you'll be out of the country, you would miss that meeting.
Yeah, I'll be in the UK. I don't know how to do the time zone. I'll see if I can.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We've had some lighter meetings this evening. Was not one of those. Wish everyone well and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.